This video is a mega compilation of my most recent 7 Days to Die tips videos. I've gone through and corrected some mistakes, updated some information for the most recent version, and edited out some of the fluff that wasn't as relevant anymore, and put them all in one neat place for you to watch in the background as you play 7 Days to Die. If you find that you've watched one of these videos way too recently to go through it again, there will be chapters on the video so you can skip over as you wish. I'm making this video, by the way, just to keep the algorithm satisfied while I work on two very big videos that need a little bit more time in the oven. So sit back, relax, and let an unreasonable amount of 7 Days to Die tips and tricks enter your supple and flexible mind. So, you just got 7 Days to Die or are looking to get back into it? Well, you've picked a great place to start. Today I'm going to give you a rundown on how to spend the first couple of days in 7 Days to Die, what to watch out for, and how to avoid dying horribly in your first week. When you first start your world in 7 Days to Die, you'll have a notification at the top right of your screen. This will tell you how to open the challenge menu, and from here you can track the tutorial quest. You want to do the tutorial quest every single time you play 7 Days to Die because you get 4 free skill points for doing it. The tutorials are fairly obvious. They'll give you yellow icons above every item you need to harvest, wood from these bushes, fiber from this grass, stones from stones, and indeed feathers from this. Then you'll be told to craft and wear a primitive outfit, but you want to make sure that you search primitive in the search bar on your crafting interface and make all 4 pieces of the primitive armor. It costs almost nothing, and wearing all 4 pieces will give you 32% damage resistance right at the start of the game. You'll then craft your club, which is an excellent starting weapon by the way, but you'll need feathers for arrows. You can get these from birds' nests, which look like this. You loot them by pressing E, but as a little tip, instead of just taking the feathers, open the nest, close it without taking anything, break the nest with your axe, and you'll get a few extra feathers, and then the loot from inside will drop on the ground and you can get the feathers from inside as well. You have to do it in that order to get it because it's just a weird mechanic. Now at the start here you might be tempted to break these tree stumps for wood, but do be careful. As you can see perfectly in my example gameplay, this can spawn bees which will damage and slow you. On the plus side, if that does happen to you, you'll get honey, but don't eat it yet. Honey can cure infections, so if you ever see this icon on your screen, eat some honey as long as the number next to it is less than 5. By the way, you can get honey from these stumps some of the time without spawning the bees. It's kind of a 50-50. Now that the tutorial challenge is done, reopen the challenge menu, redeem all the challenges you've completed, and get your 4 skill points. Skill points are the main currency of leveling in this game. You use them to buy perks. These improve your character's abilities in various ways. There are a lot of different ways you can start your character off with those 4 free skill points. Every build in 7 Days to Die is built on an attribute like perception, strength, fortitude, agility, and intellect. The easiest one to start with as a new player is definitely strength. You get a good gun, you get 2 good melee weapons, and it's also the tree that governs mining, carry capacity, and its mastery perk is very powerful. My recommendation would be to put 2 points into strength. This will unlock higher levels of all the perks in strength, and then put 2 points into pummel Pete. All this combined will get you 20% more headshot damage with all strength weapons, 10% more dismemberment chance with all strength weapons, 20% more damage with clubs, 80% more damage with clubs to knocked over opponents, and as a little tip, most zombies will fall over at half health, meaning if you can get a zombie to half health with your club, this will pummel them very well, allowing you to finish fights much faster. In addition to that, power attacks have a 70% chance to keep an opponent knocked down if they have been knocked over, so once the zombie gets to half health, you have a 70% chance to keep them knocked down with every power attack. This is a stun lock, and it's very powerful, especially for new players, and you'll use 30% less stamina to attack with your club, as well as finding more clubs and club parts and loot. This is going to benefit you a lot more than mixing up your build with a variety of survival skills across various different perks and attributes. But do feel free to try another attribute. I just recommend sticking with one for the first 10 or 20 levels of your build. On lower difficulty, these damage perks are less important, but the number one way you are going to die in this game is going to be losing health to zombies. So if you can reduce the amount of time you are in combat with zombies by killing them faster, you'll probably survive longer. Speaking of fighting zombies, you'll be given a marker to go to the trader, and you'll want to do that, but on the way you might end up in a fight with zombies. So here's the 5 key things to remember when taking on zombies in 7 Days to Die. Number 1. aim for the head. It might sound obvious, but they do take a lot more damage, meaning the fight ends faster, you use less stamina, and you take less damage. Power attacks are generally more efficient for killing because they do more damage and have higher knockdown and dismemberment chances, but light attacks are better if you're having severe stamina issues, like if you're dehydrated or starving. Every time you heavy attack, you'll have a few seconds before your stamina starts regenerating. Light attacks don't, so in some situations you may want to light attack. Next key thing to always remember is movement. Always, 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 always. That was four. Four always is. There's a fifth one. Keep moving backwards. Especially when you're new and playing on default settings, there really isn't any excuse to actually get hit by zombies if you have room behind you. Just move backwards. Point 4 is stamina management. As I mentioned before, power attacks are more stamina draining but generally more time efficient at killing zombies. But another aspect of stamina management you'll want to consider is trying to keep yourself above 50% stamina at all times, even when you're just walking around. You don't want to go sprinting around to the point of 0 stamina or jumping around for no particular reason, because you don't want to go around a corner or have a wandering horde running towards you and get into a fight with a zombie and you've got no stamina, because it's just going to get free hits on you. Drinking things generally makes your stamina regenerate faster, and eating food usually gives you a higher max stamina, so keep that in mind when managing your food and water as well. And the last point to keep in mind is that you can avoid fights with zombies if you just don't want to fight them yet. You do this by throwing stones. Whip some on your hotbar, click down and hold, and then throw it. If the zombie isn't aggro to you, it'll run after the rock. I use rock throwing almost constantly when playing on hardcore settings like Insane Nightmare, where every zombie can easily kill you if you're not careful. So, you are heading to the trader. On your way to the trader, if you run into a gore pile on the ground, go ahead and hit it with your axe. This will give you bones. You can use these to make glue, but more importantly right now, you can use them to make a knife, which is a weapon, but also a tool. You'll need it to skin animals and get meat later. Now, we want to go to the trader because they're a powerful addition to your playthrough, especially again for new players, and they have a lot of useful stuff for you. When you go inside, you'll meet Trader Rect. He's a prick, but he'll give you a free shovel. Ask him if he has a special job, and he'll send you on a buried supply mission. This is your first quest, and you'll get a free gun and a magazine of ammo for doing it. Before you leave the trader, you're also going to want to loot his compound. All of this stuff is free, most of it is useful. I'd also recommend before you head out on this buried supply mission, make yourself a writable storage crate. Place it outside his compound somewhere, because you can't build inside the trader, and you'll be kicked out at night, so you want a crate outside so that you can get anything useful anytime of day there, and you want to dump almost anything that isn't immediately useful to you. You're going to want to keep like stone, wood, arrows, any health or food items you might need soon, and that's about it at this stage in the game, as well as your weapons on your hotbar, of course. And the reason you're doing this is because you don't want to become encumbered, because it'll slow you down, and if you're slowed down, even on the slowest zombie speeds, they will just outpace you, and you'll take a lot of damage from that, so avoid. By the way, if you do end up finding this video helpful, or you found it helpful so far, I would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button. We're trying to hit 100,000 subscribers in 2026. It's going to be a hard goal, and I need every subscriber I can get if we want to hit that in time. Right now, we're just under 82,000. So if you want more 7 Days to Die tutorials like this and want to help me hit my goal, hit that subscribe button. Let's head back to the video. If, like me, when recording the video for this, your quest hasn't automatically equipped, open up your inventory, head over to the quest tab here, click Intro to Buried Supplies, and then press on the compass icon. This will track the quest and show you exactly where to go. On your way to quest, make sure you search these mailboxes on the side of the road. They often have skill magazines and books, which will make you a lot more powerful and better at crafting throughout the game. When you reach the quest location, you'll find a flag. This is how all quests are started, and you want to activate it to start the quest. Once you're there, you can't leave the area of that quest or it will fail. This applies to all quest types. For this one, you'll see an orange ring on the ground, and this is the radius the hidden chest will be in. Digging will cause this to reduce periodically, eventually showing you pretty much exactly where the box is. It will be a few blocks down in this circle somewhere. It will never be below the stone level, as far as I've ever seen in my like 3.5 thousand hours in this game. You want to dig with a shovel, of course, not your stone axe, and when mining and digging you generally do want to just light attack, because power attacks drain stamina faster, and it generally won't help you mine any faster unless it's in a few specific circumstances circumstances, but this isn't one of them. Now that you've got your buried supplies, you'll want to head back to the trader. For this quest, Rex will give you the choice of 4 guns and a pipe baton. You pretty much always want to take the pipe machine gun. Unfortunately, I misclicked and took the pipe rifle, which was very silly. The pipe machine gun uses 7.62 ammo, meaning it does very high damage, and you find it in quite high quantities in the world, compared to something like shotgun shells. It has a 15-round magazine, allowing you to deal the absolute highest DPS of the 4 starting guns. This pipe rifle I accidentally picked may well be the worst option. Perhaps the pipe shotgun would be worse, but I'll survive. At this point, it's time to decide your next move, and of course this is a survival game, so you're gonna need food, water, and shelter. Luckily, Trader Rect has an answer to all of these problems. For food, you can just buy some from him because that's his specialty. He's the food trader. But you will need money for that, and you'll have to get that by selling him things or doing jobs for him. For drinks, you can buy some from him again, or you can take a look at the vending machines behind you. These often sell basic food and water that can keep you going at the start of the game, but you will need to do jobs or sell stuff to buy them. If you want to solve the water issue more permanently, you're going to need a campfire, but first, let's get you a base. The easiest way to get yourself a starting house in 7 Days to Die without having to build one, which can be very time consuming, is to talk to Rect and ask for a job. This will send you to various tier 1 locations nearby, which can be a good way to find a POI that you can actually clear and live in without getting yourself killed. If he doesn't have any good houses, then just walk around and look for a POI which has 1 skull next to its name. This is a tier 1, meaning it's one of the safest types of POIs in the game, and you can expect it to be pretty chill. If you eat something at this point in the game, by the way, you'll see a smell icon on the right. This makes zombies more aggressive. You're going to want to find yourself a water source and crouch through it until you get a little bit wet to clean the smell away. However, if you've picked up any raw meat at this point, you can craft it into raw meat bundles, which will obscure the smell, or you can store it somewhere. Otherwise, you're going to attract zombies. The first POI I was given as a quest wasn't the greatest starter home, so I'm going to go across the street to this tier 1 and I'm going to clear it. Most POIs have an intended clearing route, so generally look for the path of least resistance when clearing POIs. You'll want to loot almost every container in POIs. Even if you don't pick everything up, it just doesn't hurt to check what they have, because sometimes you'll get something good. Tier 1 and above quests all have a loot room at the very end that you should always find and loot because it has the best stuff in there generally. If you run into an office chair like this, be sure to pick it up, open your inventory and press scrap on it. These are 6 leather each, and you want 10 leather as soon as possible for a forge. If you get into a fight you can't handle in one of these POIs, use doors to your advantage to restore stamina and hold them off. And of course, if you're really struggling, be sure to use your bow and crouch to get stealth attacks to soften up the zombies or even kill them on certain difficulties. Once you've cleared the POI, you'll want to find a room that's particularly secure, preferably upstairs if your POI has one. Make yourself a bedroll, a campfire, and a crate. You may want to craft yourself a door and replace one of the existing doors if your POI, like mine, was all locked doors. If you placed a bedroll or a land claim, you'll have a compass marker at your house, meaning you can find it again easier. Now, I'd recommend heading back to the trader again, gathering up all the stuff you left there, and in the quest if you did one, and check his inventory before he closes just before nightfall, which happens to be at 10 PM. At night, zombies start to run and harder zombies spawn, so early on it's best just to hide in your base, manage your storage, craft stuff, and maybe mine if you have access to the underground. At Trader X, you're going to want to sell off anything you don't need to get yourself a cooking pot for 600 dukes. But make sure you don't sell off any mechanical parts you have, as they'll be powerful later. It's unlikely, but also if you have like acid or a beaker, probably don't sell those either. If you don't have enough money though, don't worry. You can also loot a cooking pot from various kitchens in the world, or craft one with a forge, which is the most reliable way to do it. In order to get a forge, which you'll need if you didn't get a cooking pot on day 1, because your water is going to start running out soon, and you'll need it for other things later on, you'll need to find 3 additional Forge Ahead skill magazines. These are most commonly found in cement mixers and forges. They have a 75% chance of spawning there. There is, however, one of each of those inside Trader Rex, so chances are, if you looted his POI thoroughly enough, you left with 2 of those anyway. Find the other one. Your best bet is to explore and look for another cement mixer. I found one at the Garage First Construction POI, which is a very common location to find, and at the end of the street there is this little POI tile that you're going to get very familiar with if you put a lot of hours in this game. It has a working stiff tools truck, a crane, and a ditch with a dog in it. There's also a cement mixer, which will almost always give you a Forge Ahead. Combining all those, you will have 3 Forge Aheads quite comfortably, and you can make a forge. The next major limitation is going to be leather. The office chairs I showed you earlier are of course probably the best source of them. You can find 2 of those, you're good. If not, you can kill animals like rabbits or dogs. I would not recommend fighting a dog right now if you're new to the game, but yeah, you know, you've got that pipe machine gun, you could do it. But the easiest is to use your stone axe on booths in various diner POIs like this one. I, however, found 2 leather office chairs in the entrance of this daycare. In general, if you think a building might have like desks and computers, you can usually bet that there's going to be an office chair at one of those. You're also going to need 50 cobblestone, which is just made from stone and clay in your inventory, and I'm sure you've figured out how to get both of those by now. A log, which is crafted with 10 wood, 3 duct tape, which you may have looted from trash, but you can also craft it from glue and cloth, which you will have also likely looted from several of these trash bags throughout the day. If not, keep an eye out for them on the second day. You will find a lot of these trash bags, they're your main source of a lot of things early on. And then you're going to need short iron pipes. You'll probably also loot these during the day, but if you don't, get your stone axe and hit any sinks, toilets and baths you find, and once you've got all that, just craft your forge and place it down. Now to use it, you want to put some fuel, like say wood, in the fuel slot, and put some scrap iron and some clay in the 2 smelting slots. This will slowly smelt these 2 resources into your forge to be used, and once some of that has smelted in, click on the last tab of the crafting menu in the forge or search for cooking pot, and once you've got the resources, craft one, and you can also get a grill here if you'd like. You won't need your forge for much else in the very first couple of days, but it's a good idea to just throw scrap iron and clay in there whenever you find it and smelt it into forged iron, because you will need probably a couple of hundred of that in the next week. So your campfire is where you craft food and drinks. If you have a cooking pot, you can turn murky water into clean drinkable water. You may have collected some empty jars over the past day, and you can fill those at any water source by right-clicking with the jars equipped. And there you go, water should be largely solved for you, even if you have jar refund rate set to 0%, as it would be by default. You'll likely loot enough jars and murky water to keep yourself going as long as you have a water source and a campfire. Here, you can also cook food. Be warned though, if you're playing with no jar refunds, which again is the default, making boiled eggs is never worth it because you lose a jar but get no water from it. You might be starving at this point if, like me, you found no food on the first day, but just try to not burn too much excess stamina and health during the night, and wait until morning so you can safely go out and search for food on day 2. If you have any eggs, you can actually eat them raw with no negative effects, which is what I did. It's a bit wasteful, but eggs are extremely common, so I wouldn't stress about it too much right now at the start of the game. In order to cook foods, you're going to need to get better at cooking, which is done by finding skill magazines. When we search for food tomorrow, we'll almost definitely find at least one. So it's 4 AM in the next morning, or you're halfway through the first day because you're going much faster than I was, and you are free to keep playing the game without worrying about the dangerous zombies, but you may find that it's raining if it is day 2. If it is, take out your torch that you got at the start of the game. This will keep you warm in the rain. 7 Days to Die has a temperature mechanic which is a bit deeper than the scope of this video, but if you're in the forest biome and it's night or raining, a torch will keep you going. A campfire will also help, but that's not mobile. So for food, you've got 3 main options at the start of the game: looting, scavenging, which are different, and hunting. Hunting is a bit of a pain in the ass, but if you happen to see an animal that you can safely kill, just go ahead and shoot it and skin it with your knife. Be careful of boars though, they're a lot tougher than they look, and they will fight back. Scavenging is good if you're lucky and have some nearby farms. I'm gonna put my first level 2 skill point into living off the land to gather twice as many crops as normal when harvesting plants. We'll cover looting food in a second. For now, let's show scavenging. If you find a farm with green corn stalks, these can be hit for food. You may also find things like potatoes or pumpkins growing in various other farms. Eating raw corn isn't great, but if you do get a grill and 1 skill magazine, you can cook it into a food that gives 10 food. But you'll need water to offset how dry these foods are. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. The house I was sent to had crops inside and a kitchen, and we want kitchens for those cooking skill magazines. And luckily I did find one, which lets me bake potatoes and grill corn. These are vital early game food sources if you don't want to rely on vending machines, as I said. You can see I came out with 18 corn and 4 potatoes, which is a couple of days worth of food if I grill it and bake it, but I will need water to counteract the dehydration of it. So what about looting? Well, looting is a good idea for early food because you can get some high ticket items that will hold you over for a couple of days, but it's more luck dependent than the last one. For this, we want to head into town and find a commercial area. You can tell you're in a commercial area because the roads will be wider and there'll be a lot of shops around. Almost every town town is going to have some kind of diner or fast food place, and you're going to want to start your search for food here for a few specific containers. First, any drinks containers you find, like these boxes of beer or coffee machines, are going to have a chance to give you drinks, or jars, which you will of course need for hydration. Then you want to look out for food piles like these. The small ones will give you canned foods and occasional pieces of meat, but bigger ones have chances for even better stuff. Make sure you're searching all the cupboards in these POIs because they have food like corn and potatoes and cooking skill magazines in them. You also want to search these sealed shamway crates, however mine had nothing in them. I went to another POI and this time I got lucky. I got a hobo stew, which is a very powerful food item, in the end loot container. But that actually had nothing to do with the fact I was in a diner. That's just an item that can spawn in tier 1 end loots regardless of which location you're in. Alright, with food, water, shelter and basic combat covered, we have one last thing to cover for your first couple of days: questing. So now that you have your basic needs met, it's time to get a job in a vehicle. You want to get to questing so that you can get money to buy stuff, but also get rewards for the quests. But you can also unlock higher tier quests, which give you more money, XP, and rewards. And you get quest tier completion rewards. If you navigate back to your quest tabs, you'll see tier 1, 1 out of 10, or however many quests you've done so far. Once you get this up to 10, you'll get a reward, and one of the guaranteed rewards that you absolutely almost always want to take is the bicycle. This will save you a lot of time and save you a lot of deaths as well. If you want to just rush to the bicycle as fast as possible, take fetch jobs, which are as close as possible to you because these can be completed by just going in, getting the satchel and leaving, freeing up more time to do more quests and other stuff. Oh, and by the way, at this point, if you've not already done this, go into your challenges tab from the start of the game and redeem any of the completed ones. You'll get a bunch of XP. I got a whole level from doing this at this point. There's a bunch of good rewards in there as well, and it'll also tutorialize a whole lot of the useful stuff for you in 7 Days to Die, so be sure to take a look through all these challenges if you're ever curious how to find certain materials. So the next thing for you to worry about after you've done all of this is to prepare for the Horde night at 10 PM on day 7. It is 7 Days to Die after all. You'll want to collect ammo and building materials and either build a horde base, which I would recommend looking on YouTube for a tutorial for one, or sit on top of a roof of a concrete or stone building and hope for the best. If you've played 7 Days to Die more than a week, something like this has happened to you. Shout out to Crab Clown Jimmy, by the way, for that masterpiece. He built my base design deliberately wrong for comedy and accidentally created the perfect example of what we're about to break down. Because here's the thing, the game never really tells you the rules. It gives you blocks and it gives you the build menu and it kind of lets you figure out the hard way. But once you understand those rules, you'll never build a base that collapses like that again. Hopefully. This is structural integrity and it's about to save every base you build from now on. You can stack infinite steel blocks on one wooden frame and it'll never collapse under that weight. It sounds wrong, but that's how vertical support works. If you look at most of your blocks, you'll see that they all have a vertical support stat of yes or no, and this means that the block either does or does not provide vertical support. If it says yes, it can carry an infinite amount as long as it's connected by other blocks down to bedrock. If it says no, like say this dew collector, then it can't support anything above it. So don't go try building any dew collector pillars. I know, all of your base building plans have been ruined. The caveat to all of this is that every block in that stack needs to be vertically supported all the way down to bedrock. If you break any of the blocks in that chain, the whole thing above it starts weighing down the blocks around it, and that's where horizontal support comes in, which is where your bases fail. Anyway, that was very overdramatic. On to horizontal stability. So why did that happen? Mass. But mass is actually only half the equation. Every block also has a horizontal support stat. Let's take our wooden frame here. This has a horizontal support of 40 and 5 mass. That means it can hold 8 more of itself out horizontally, but a 9th will cause it to collapse. But if we take something like a steel block with a mass of 20, the wooden frame can only hold 2 of these and a 3rd will cause it to snap. How does it achieve this magical feat of holding infinite steel blocks above it while only being able able to hold 2 steel blocks on the side. Stop asking questions, bucko, video games are just stupid like that. Now, you'll also find that steel blocks have much more horizontal support, 300 to be exact. This means that they can hold up to 15 of themselves before snapping. But there's actually another strange quirk to all of this. Horizontal support applies to each side independently, so the steel block can hold 15 steel blocks on each of its faces without issue. But if you add one too many, to say this one on the left, the entire left arm collapses, but the rest is completely fine. So always be aware of the mass and horizontal support of the blocks you're using to avoid mistakes like we saw in the intro. So you're telling me I need to remember all of that? No, the game actually does tell you when you're about to mess up. You've probably just been ignoring it if you've had base collapse issues. Have you ever noticed that blocks kind of change color when you're placing them in 7 Days to Die? Did you ever wonder what that meant? Me neither, because thinking is for nerds. But if you want your base to not collapse without having to take a business admin class, you should be paying attention to these colors. When placing blocks, you'll see them change color. If there's no color, or like a white color, you're fine. Yellow means you should really start considering supporting these blocks. If it's red, that block will cause a collapse. Where this becomes tricky is with reinforcing blocks. When you're reinforcing with a stone axe, you won't get a block ghost, and the problem is, you'll add mass without thinking about it, and the game doesn't have a way to warn you, which is exactly what happened to Jimmy in the introduction section. With that in mind, it can be a very good idea to keep a block in your inventory and check it against any blocks you plan to reinforce. This will literally show you whether or not that extra mass is going to cause a collapse, so you can know to add more support. But honestly, you should probably focus on adding more support than you might necessarily need, because as you may know, gravity isn't the only thing trying to bring down your base. Right. Zombies. All that structural integrity theory means nothing if you don't understand how the horde interacts with it. There's 3 big things you need to know. 1, they target tall pillars first if they can't find a path to you. So with that in mind, always have extra pillars as a means of supporting your base so it can withstand losing some of those pillars if something goes wrong. 2, if they fall long distances, they probably will enter something called destroy area mode. This causes them to be on your base for about 10 seconds, which can be disabled by damaging them. Regardless, you should try to always have traps near the base of your base to damage the zombies out of the destroy area mode, or a means to shoot down at them and damage them from your fighting position, or maybe grenades. 3, they are aware of the HP of blocks and will make decisions based on that, i.e. if you are building your pillars out of wood and your fighting area is made of steel, they won't bother going through the steel, they will target the wood and bring your base down from below. So focus your strongest blocks on the foundations and pillars of the base first to avoid them just undermining you. One thing you should also note is that most blocks, regardless of shape, will provide the same mass and horizontal stability. So a concrete plate is basically the same as a concrete block. That means you can reinforce your base without having to take up as much space using smaller blocks. Obviously, you won't be able to build on the same tile as those plates because of 7 Days to Die's grid system, but you can use this to do things like having really strong interior supports that have the support of like 5 blocks but only take up the room of about 1 block, allowing your base to be less cramped and give you much more room to move. As you can see, there's a lot of ways to lose your base, so let's talk about what you can do when a base is too important to lose. A very underutilized mechanic in 7 Days to Die is the ability to build anything you want for free in a test world. You just make a new world, you open the console with F1, and then type DM for debug mode and CM for creative mode. In the creative menu, located here, you can spawn in as much building material as you could ever want. With this, you can experiment in a world that doesn't matter before spending the 50,000 steel you before using the 50,000 steel you spent a while gathering in your main world. Also, if you want to play with specifically Horde Knights, press pause and you'll see this menu here and allow you to move the time around as you need it to set the day to 7 whenever you want. Instead, you can use the command ST space 7000 space 22 space 0, which will set the day to 7000, the hour to 22, and the minute to 0, which will immediately put you on a day 7000 horde, by the way, so be ready for that. And of course, you can swap those numbers out for whatever you like if you need a specific day. Just remember that structure of ST space the day space the hour space the minute. Now that you can control this test world, you should know about one last useful base planning mechanic, the structural integrity visualizer, which is located on the same menu as the time slider. Click to enable this, and when you go back into your world, you'll see the structural integrity of your base. Green shows completely supported blocks. Yellow is relatively healthy, but not fully supported. But anything orange or red needs to be provided with more support, or it's a major risk for your base to collapse. With that, you can plan your most important base design safely and relatively time efficiently in another world, and take that knowledge onto your servers or single player worlds without having to actually cheat or disable achievements in your actual world that you really do care about. So, you want to maximize your efficiency in farming in 7 Days to Die? Well, you've come to the right place. We'll cover everything you need to know to farm as efficiently as possible in 7 Days to Die. Let's jump in. The first thing you'll need to do to farm is get your hands on farm plots. Farm plots are 1 by 1 by 1 blocks that allow you to plant seeds. You place the block down, put the seed in your hand, and right click to plant it. You'll need access to light and space above the farm plot block, of course, to be able to plant the seed. Aside from a few special crops, this is the only way to farm crops. There is no way to till the soil or anything in 7 Days to Die anymore. The plots are crafted by default with 4 wood, 10 rotten flesh, 25 nitrate powder, and 100 clay. So not a huge barrier to entry, but if you want a lot of plots, that will become quite expensive quite quickly. So you'll want to reduce that, which we'll cover in a second. An alternative strategy though, if you don't have the resources, is to just find a POI which has existing farm plots. Believe it or not, these can be planted on with any seeds just fine. However, you can't pick them up and move the plots the same way you would with farm plots, which is done with a shovel, just hitting them basically. The best POI I would say for farm plots early on is the tier 1 cobweb cottage. It's a very common tier 1 POI with 45 free farm plots in the back. Just make sure you place a land claim block or a bedroll to stop the quest browser from sending you back here so you can use it for farming. But there's a couple of other good options as well. The cartel house has roughly the same amount of plots as the cobweb cottage, though it's a harder POI to clear on day 1, though I wouldn't say significantly. And arguably, the cartel house is a better house overall to live in. The Senora Drogas house actually has the most plots I've found so far, at over 50, but again, it's a less common POI, and once again, it is a much harder clear than the previous two. If you want to start farming, definitely consider starting off in one of these POIs to skip having to gather up all those farm plots. If you do still need some more farm plots though and want to craft them, let's move on to the next tip. Living off the land. Living off the land is a general perk which increases your farming yields and reduces farm plot costs. First 2 ranks will reduce the farm plot cost by 50%, so it's really quite useful for large scale farm plot crafting. But even if not, you should pretty much always be taking living off the land anyway if you want to farm, because it's pretty much not sustainable without it. Main effects of the perk are giving triple crop yields and a 50% chance to gain an extra crop. So let's talk about crop yields and how farming works. When you harvest a wild crop in 7 Days to Die, you'll get 1 of the plant. This sucks because it costs 5 crops to make a seed, meaning to plant 1 crop, you need to break 5. This is slightly better with farmed crops because you'll get twice as many per plant and you'll get a 50% chance to get a seed. And it's worth noting that both wild and farmed crops are affected by the living off the land perk. However, in order to become sustainable or profitable with your farming, you will need that living off the land perk. Otherwise, you'll waste all or most, or even in some cases, you won't even have enough crops to replant all your farm plots. So use wild crops to get your farm started and then rely on your farms for the double yield, allowing up to 7 crops per plant, which is enough to replant your seed 100% of the time, even if you never get a seed back, and still come out with a few spare crops. In addition, though, you should look into farming armor. Farming boots at level 6 will give you an additional 20% chance to harvest the seed when harvesting planted crops. Not wild crops though. This is a significant increase to the amount of crops you'll get actually, because every seed you don't have to craft is 5 crops saved. Then the farming outfit adds a 100% chance to harvest an additional crop. This actually does apply to wild crops, so it can be useful there. This 100% chance to get an extra crop is added at the end of your farming calculation, so it's not like it'll be added before living off the land and cause like a massive balloon in your crop harvest. It just takes your max yield from 7 to 8. Then there's the farming hat, which gives you a 20% higher chance to find seeds in loot. This is really nice if you really want to maximize harvest, but that is a lot of investment for a hat that you basically have to wear at all times, or at least keep on you at all times without looting. The farming gloves and the completion effect of the farming outfit don't do anything for farming themselves, so you don't have to worry about them if you're farming. So with all that in mind, you can now get your farm plots up and plant your seeds and get maximum yields from them. Let's talk about the crops you have available to you and how they work. First of all but one crop must be placed on the farm plot blocks. The exception is mushrooms, which you can place just about anywhere. Once you plant your seeds, you have to wait 2 in-game days for the crop to grow. If you destroy the plant before it's grown, you'll get the seed back, but obviously you'll have to stop that timer and have to replant it for 2 days again. Trees, by the way, don't require farm plot blocks to plant. I'm not sure if we want to count this as farming, but for the sake of clarity, it won't hurt. Trees can be planted on any terrain, but will only fully grow on non-desert terrain. They have several growth stages and can be harvested as early as you would like, but the maximum yield will come from fully grown trees at 1200 health. So try to wait for those before harvesting them. Which leads me into the normal plants that you're going to farm. All but one kind of seed is unlocked by the Southern Farming Skill Magazine. Unlike most skill magazines, it only has 20 ranks, so it's often much quicker to complete. You can boost your odds of finding this book further by investing in the Living Off the Land perk, which is yet another reason to invest in it if you're going to do any farming. And the books are most often found in food-related containers. The first seed you unlock is cotton, which is a versatile crafting ingredient. You can find a lot of cotton to start your farms if you wish to farm it in the forest biome. At level 4, you unlock goldenrod and chrysanthemum, which are used in some drinks, and chrysanthemum is even used in paint. These can both also be found in large numbers in the forest biome. In fact, these 3 crops are so frequent that you should probably not even waste time farming them. Just go out and harvest up a few wild fields and you'll probably have more than you know what to do with. At level 6, you'll unlock coffee. Now, coffee is very rarely found growing in some farming POIs, but of course, it's offset by the fact that you can turn all excess coffee you find in coffee machines into seeds if you would like. This one is more worthwhile for farming, as the plant is definitely less common overall, although there's arguably plenty of coffee to be looted, so maybe it's just not worth it depending on how you play. At level 8, you unlock yucca, and this is used in some useful foods and drinks, but again, it's very common in the desert, so it's another one I would advise against really wasting your farm plots on. At level 10, you unlock aloe, which is used in aloe cream, which is then used to make first aid bandages. This one is very useful, but much like yucca, you can find huge amounts of this in the desert, so you only really need to farm it if you're planning on making 1 billion first aid bandages, or you don't have access to a desert, or for some reason you have genuinely picked your desert completely clean of these crops, which would take an unreal amount of time. At level 12, you unlock blueberries, which are used in some food and drink items. This one is very commonly found growing wild in the snow biome, so again, I really wouldn't bother farming it unless you're terrified of the wildlife in the snow biome. At level 12, you also unlock hops, and this is the first big contender I think for a crop you should probably always farm. Hops are used in beer, and beer is an excellent stamina restoring item for melee builds or times for when you need to run away. Additionally, it's a must-have for brawling builds due to the triple damage bonus it gives at brawling builds. Additionally, beer is used in most powerful consumables in the late game, like first aid kits, fort bites, steroids, and recog. Combined with the relative rarity of the hops plant in the wild, you should definitely consider adding hops to your farm if you want to use beer to its full effect. At level 14, you'll unlock pumpkin seeds. Pumpkins are used to make jack-o'-lanterns and pumpkin-based foods, the most useful of which is probably the pumpkin cheesecake, which gives you a 5% discount at the trader. This is a decent one to farm as it's quite rare in the world, but at the same time the food items aren't as powerful as a lot of other ones, so again it'll highly depend on your preferences here, especially if you plan on building 100 billion jack-o'-lanterns for some reason. You will want to farm pumpkins. At level 16, you finally unlock mushrooms. Mushrooms are a no-brainer. They don't require a farm plot, so there's genuinely just no reason to not grow them pretty much all the time, which is advice I will never ever follow in my own gameplay. These are used in antibiotics, biome consumables, awesome sauce which gives you a discount, and 3 very powerful food items. There's no reason not to grow them, except for the fact that I'm stubborn and stupid. At level 18, you unlock corn. Corn is used in a huge amount of foods directly as corn, but you can also turn it into cornmeal, which is used in a whole other host of valuable foods and even medical items. Corn is an obvious choice for any farm as it's used in damn near every late game food recipe. Then at the final level of farming you get potatoes. Potatoes are also used in most of the same recipes as corn is and should pretty much always be paired with it if you're growing it, unless you specifically are only going to make steak and potato meals which don't require corn. The last unlockable crop, and arguably the most powerful, is super corn. Super corn is a valuable late game crop used in crafting Fallout Flush, glue, 3 grandpa's drinks which are pretty powerful if you can be bothered to craft them. But the main use of super corn is the selling price. A stack of 125 sells for a base of 5,000, and that can be boosted up significantly, allowing you to really abuse farming for money. But how do you unlock it? Well, on the one hand, you don't have to deal with the stupid skill magazines, but on the other hand, it can be difficult to get the exact location you need to be near you, so theoretically you could get it on day 1 if you just knew where this location was in your world. I think you can also occasionally get the schematic in random loot and as trader rewards, but the guaranteed route is more powerful, I would say, and that is the Bob's, Boar's and Carl's Corn POI. If you come to the front of the POI, which is where these 2 signs are, and then walk up to the 2 front doors and break the double door on the right side here, then walk in and look to your right again, you'll find a tube. And inside there you'll find a chest, and inside the chest you will find 5 supercorn seeds and 1 supercorn seeds schematic. You will have to either break 3,250 health to get to it, or disable the flame trap above by pressing the buttons. I think green then yellow always turns it off. I might be wrong. Feel free to do the rest of this POI, by the way. There's a lot of meat, bones, rotten flesh, supercorn to be had in here. It's a very useful POI. Just be very, very well armed for what lives in the caves underneath the house if you intend to go there. And no, it's not zombies. I played 7 Days to Die on PC for 3,540 hours before I noticed this very simple trick, and with it, you'll never starve again, even on the most brutal of settings. Now I know what you're thinking. I never starve anyway. Meat is abundant, Trader Rex sells food, and vending machines exist. And indeed for thousands of hours I would have agreed with you, till I realised 2 things. 1, with the new smell system, hunting meat on harder settings without a vehicle can get you killed. And 2, developers are going to be adding toggles in the future to disable things like vending machines and reduce the effectiveness of traders. So if you ban the trader and turn off vending machines, how do you eat early on? Scavenging diners will work for the first few days, but there's only a couple of those in each town, and are you really gonna walk to the next town to get a little bit of food? Sustainable farming requires thousands of resources and skill points you probably can't afford early on. The solution is what I've called weirdo farming. The strategy is where you deliberately don't farm sustainably, and I think the 2 reasons I never did this are, 1, I'm a human, so I understand farming is a sustainable thing. That's just how our brains work. It's the fundamental of our society. If it wasn't sustainable, we wouldn't do it. But it's not in 7 Days to Die at the start of the game, so a lot of people just go, well, what's the point of it then? 2, I was never really pressed into doing this until I put those harder settings to use myself. Farm plots are a bit too expensive early on. Making just 20 farm plots requires thousands of clay and hundreds of nitrate, wood, and rotten flesh. And I am not investing 5 whole skill points into farming in the first week when I need those for other things like mining and combat. Instead, we're going to plant on someone else's land. First, we need to get seeds, and you don't have to worry about the seed crafting skill magazines for any of this. You're going to want to steal them from POIs, in particular these produce stalls that you see on the corner of a lot of the forest biome towns. And if you see these pallets in POIs, these have corn seeds in them. Those are a big help as well. And if you aren't playing without traders, but you want to use this strat anyway, you can, and you would be able to buy some seeds for your farm as well. Once you have seeds, you need a POI with player usable farm plots. You can't just shovel these plots up, they will break, but you can use them where they sit. Here are some specific POIs you can look for. Any single one of them will work fine. Indeed, you could farm in all of these if you were somehow able to keep the seed supply going. And there are some that I have not mentioned, that's just because I've either forgotten them or I don't know them, but these are 6 very good ones. The first one is the Cobweb Cottage. This is a tier 1, and I think it's kind of like the holy grail. It's easy to clear. It has a 9x5 garden in the back that is 45 free farm plots. Doing the maths, 45 crafted farm plots without any living off the land would cost you 180 wood, 450 rotten flesh, 1125 nitrate, and 4500 clay soil, which is a lot at the very start of the game when you have other things to be worrying about. Or you can just walk into Cobweb Cottage and have one built in. Next one is the Potato Residence. This one is a lot worse. It has 15 plots inside with light access, but it is very safe and more common, I find, than the Cobweb Cottage. The next is the Cartel House. This is a tier 2, and I almost always find one of these in my starting towns. It has 45 plots outside and usually a large amount of harvestable crops ready for you to just go in and make a start with, but beware of the dog hiding at the back of the garden. The fourth one is the Crypt, which is a tier 2 as well. This has 59 free farm plots hidden in the walls and bushes, and it actually makes for a great base in general, so you could just move in here. And number 5 is the Film Fanatic House, which is another tier 2. This has 57 farm plots spread throughout the garden, but it can be hard to find it in the forest biome in my experience, but it's an obvious choice if you spot it. Thank you to this user for letting me know about this one in my previous farming video. And the last one I know about that's particularly good is the Senor Drogas Residence. 56 plots and is usually very easy to find because you can see it from far away, but you do have to be careful here because it's a very high tier POI and there is a guaranteed feral and dog spawn in here, but you can access the farm plots relatively safely. So you want to find Cobweb Cottage or any of these POIs basically, clear as much as you need to safely access the farm plots or completely clear it, and then place a bedroll or a land claim block. You will almost definitely want to do that, not just to stop zombie respawns, but because that will stop the quest browser from locating this POI as one it can reset. So if you're worried about forgetting that you've planted crops here and or maybe you're playing a little bit absent-mindedly, you might accidentally remove all your crops from the POI. So placing down a bedroll will not only stop zombie respawns, but it'll also stop that from happening. And indeed, if you're on multiplayer, that'll also stop other players from accidentally doing it to you. So yeah, land claims and bedrolls, very, very useful. What you're going to want to do is plant any of the seeds you've scavenged in your first couple of days of playing the game, and then come back exactly 2 days later. What I find is making a little map marker on my map above the POI, and then literally saying the time that I planted the crops so I know to come back 2 days later is a very good way to keep track of that. When you come back in 2 days, you want to harvest all your crops and just replant with whatever other seeds you found in those 2 days. This is not a sustainable farming method where you can harvest all the crops, turn some into seeds, and then replant them and walk away with profit. This is purely burning your seeds. Given I know a lot of people, myself included, usually just throw those seeds away at the start of the game anyway, this is just going to be free food for bringing those seeds here every couple of days. So you're wasting less and you're getting more food, which you are going to need on these much more harder settings that are going to be a very, I think, popular way to play the game whenever that menu toggle update comes out. Of course, you can play it right now if you just choose not to use the vending machines and stuff. I do recommend putting exactly 1 point into living off the land, because this is 1 skill point which will double your farming yields which is very cheap and very efficient compared to doing the full 5 skill points to max out living off the land. It's not really worth it unless you do want to go really hard into farming, which you should usually do later. Again, if you're playing on lower difficulties, then the combat's not going to be that hard, then you can afford to do stuff like putting all your initial skill points into living off the land. But I'm assuming most people are going to want to use this strategy on harder settings, so one living off the land is more efficient. Now, while waiting for your crops to grow, you want to go out and just scavenge various POIs as you go and just keep hold of the seeds rather than throwing them away, and you'll have like a little batch of them every few days. You might not always be able to fill out your farm plots, but it's good enough for getting a lot of extra food. Another thing you can do though, and this isn't really a tip that took me thousands of hours to figure out, this is a bonus tip I'm adding in here, you can scavenge specific POIs that have existing food that you can then use to eat. You could turn it into seeds, but you're not skilled enough as far as living off the land is concerned for that to be sustainable or profitable, so just eat that food that you get from these POIs. You're going to want to look for Mason Farms, the Boar Barn, the Sweet Sweet Honey Pot, McPherson UFO Museum, Sawyer Family Farm. The Judy Witch has loads of pumpkins and mushrooms, but be careful, the mushrooms are in the basement and you might experience some pretty hardcore zombies in there because it is a tier 4. The Shady Swine has potatoes and hops, but you will be attacked by 2 boars for going in here, so be ready to deal with those. Spikes are a good way to deal with them, I find, and bring paper and fiber to manage the smell, but that is 60 free meat if you can kill those 2 boar as well. Now, you might be worried about the foods crafting skill magazines, like are you really going to survive off of raw potatoes and stuff? And the short answer is not exactly, but let's talk about mid-game food items like the vegetable stew. Do you need that in order for it to be worth it? Do you need to rush cooking magazines? And honestly, the answer is no, and I think mid-game foods are a bit of a scam in this game. Late-game foods, very good. Mid-game foods, they're a convenience, I think. Here's why. Let's look at the math. Veggie stew costs 2 corn, 2 potatoes, 2 mushroom, 1 water. The stats for eating this item is 31 food, 15 health, 20 water, and 20 stamina. However, if you took those raw ingredients and grilled the corn and the potato separately and then just ate the mushrooms and drank the water, you would actually get 44 food, 26 health. You'd break even on water and you would only get 10 max stamina. So grilling the ingredients of a vegetable stew gives you more food and health than the stew, but the stew is much more water efficient. Early game, I think you care more about food, especially since jars have made water survival much easier earlier on. Grilled corn only takes 1 book to unlock, baked potato takes 2 books, and grilled meat only takes 6. And honestly, it's not even that much better than eating charred meat. Assuming you've got a good water supply, you can survive off of these 3 very basic food items quite easily if you've got a good source of them. The lack of water in these grilled foods does hurt you though, and you were playing with a very low jar refund rate, for example. Find a vitamin, eat that, and then just scoop up as much water as you need from any water source in the game. That will prevent you from getting dysentery. You will take health damage, but here's where this kind of balances out. All those grilled foods that are wasting your water will also just restore your health. So you can go to your water source, damage yourself, and then heal yourself, and then have full food, and then at the end of that, you'll be full health, water, and food. It's a little bit rough. This is an early game survival technique for when you don't have the other crutches that this game has for food, and in a post-vending machine, post-trader world, this weirdo farming, I think, is going to be an important strategy to keep your stomach full early on because of how unreliable harvesting meat can be sometimes. Sometimes you go days without seeing an animal. It takes a lot of time investment to go hunting versus just visiting this one POI every couple of days. This method is actually pretty effective, and it's probably what the Fun Pimps want us to do, even if it is the weirdest way to do farming in a video game I've ever seen. This video is going to equip you with some of the most important info you need to get a good start in 7 Days to Die. Enough yap, let's jump in. So, you need resources, huh? No? Well, I'm telling you how to get them anyway. Specifically, the mineable resources. When you walk around in 7 Days to Die, you'll find 8 mineable resources in the world. 9 if you count wood. The others are stone, iron, lead, oil, nitrate, coal, clay, and sand. Sand comes from sand that you'll find in the desert or alongside roads. Clay comes from the grass or the dirt that you see throughout the world, and stone comes from these rocks or these bigger rocks or the underground stone that you can mine, which are actually much more efficient than the small rocks, by the way. Iron is found in these nodes and it can be seen on your map as a rust-colored dot. Lead is found in these nodes and can be found on the map as a blue dot. Oil is found in the desert biome exclusively and can can be seen on your map as a purple dot, nitrate is white on the map and it looks like this, and coal is black on the map and it looks like this. Additionally, as of 2.0, iron is most common in the forest, nitrate is most common in the burnt forest, coal is most common in the snow, and lead is most common in the wasteland. By the way, when it comes to iron, another good source of iron is going to be wrenching it from cars. You'll get huge piles of scrap iron as a byproduct of doing that, but we'll talk about scrapping more later. Another thing you should probably be aware of is all the harvestable plants around you. In farms around the world, you can commonly find potatoes and corn, with some POIs also having things like blueberries, coffee, or even hops and pumpkins in a couple of farms. The general forest biome is home to huge amounts of goldenrod and chrysanthemum, which are used to make goldenrod tea and red tea, respectively. Goldenrod tea will cure your dysentery if you somehow get it, and red tea will make you use less food and water to restore stamina. Later on, you can use both to make mineral water, which does both effects as well. Cotton is also found in the forest and can be used to make cloth for loads of different recipes. In the burnt forest, you'll find mushrooms growing all over the floor, which are used in biome consumables and several food items. In the desert, you'll find aloe, which can be used to make aloe cream for first aid bandages, a very good healing item, as well as yucca, which can be used to make efficient drinks like yucca juice or yucca juice smoothies. In the snow, you'll find blueberries pretty much everywhere, which are used in a few foods and drinks. And in the wasteland, you'll find glowing mushrooms, which are only really used in the Fallout Flush wasteland consumable, but they can also be eaten to do this to yourself, I guess, if you want to, for some reason. Let's talk about forges. Forges are unlocked at 4 Forge Ahead magazines and require a log, cobblestone, leather, duct tape, and iron pipes to get. Wood and cobblestone you should already know, given that you know what a tree is and I showed you how to get stone and clay. Leather can be found from booths or couches, or from hunting animals, or probably best, I would say, from scrapping leather chairs you find throughout various POIs, which is where I get most of mine. Duct tape is crafted from glue and cloth, which are very commonly looted in trash, and short iron pipes are also quite commonly looted and salvaged with wrenches, but if you're having a hard time getting them at the very start of the game, you can use a stone axe on toilets, sinks, and these pipe pile things to get some. To get your 4 Forge Ahead magazines, you're best putting some points in lockpicking or advanced engineering to boost your chances, and then search tool-related containers as well as any book containers, which are always good. But a real good option is always checking the trader compounds for them. Cement mixers and forges have a 75% chance of dropping Forge Ahead magazines, so you can always search trader compounds. And indeed, if you find a wild cement mixer, you can search them too. That tends to be how I get my first few books to unlock my forge, is just cement mixers I find in the world. So once you've done that, you can make your forge and place it. You want to put your fuel in here, stuff you want to smelt into here, and then activate the forge. This will slowly put resources into the forge, which you can then use to craft items out of the forge. Let's talk about forge tools. These are the 3 images you can see on the top right of your forge interface. The first is advanced bellows. These are unlocked first. They're easily crafted with these materials and can be used to increase the speed your forge smelts at. The next is the anvil. Despite being unlocked later than the bellows, you can usually loot or buy them much sooner. If you do want to craft one though, it takes a significant iron investment and they're actually made at the forge. These will increase the speed you craft items at the forge, so the two combined can increase your forge's efficiency significantly. Crucible is a mid to late game item that unlocks steel craftables at the forge. To unlock it, you'll need to have maxed out workstations, which will require 75 Forge Ahead magazines, and then you'll need all of these materials. Another good choice is to just buy one at the trader when they appear, but it's not always reliable. So, you have your forge. What about a workbench? Well, for the workbench, you're probably going to need to get yourself a wrench, which we'll go over a little bit later, but you don't necessarily need one. To craft a workbench, you're going to need level 10 workstations crafting, and then 25 forged iron, 20 mechanical parts, 5 duct tape, 100 nails, and 100 wood. Forged iron is made at the forge along with nails, requiring both clay and scrap iron. The mechanical parts could be a problem without the wrench, but you can loot mechanical parts from various tool-related containers or buy them from the trader. Another possibility is looting an engine. If you loot an engine, you can actually scrap it for 30 mechanical parts, and these are most commonly found when looting cars. The workbench has no extra tools, unlike the forge or the campfire. And remember, even though you need a workbench to craft certain things, you can also just use the workbench as a second crafting queue to make whatever you need faster, like cobblestone or spikes. Let's kick it up a notch to the cement mixer. The cement mixer is used to craft concrete, which is the third and second last tier of building material. To get one, you'll need 30 workstations crafting and 1 engine, 25 forged iron, 10 mechanical parts, and 4 springs. Engines can be looted from cars but are most easily salvaged from cars using a wrench. Springs are also mostly found by wrenching cars or beds. If you are trying to get one of these without a wrench, getting the springs is going to be very difficult, but you can sometimes loot them from tool-related loot and in trash, or again buy them from the trader if you're lucky. Once you've made your cement mixer, you'll need cement and crushed sand as well as stone to make concrete. To make cement, you just need to smelt stone into your forge and craft it. For crushed sand, you can either dig up sand or more easily just tell your cement mixer to convert stone into sand. So the next big workstation you'll need is the chemistry station. The chemistry station requires 50 workstations crafting, as well as 5 acid, 3 cooking pots, 100 forged iron, 30 short iron pipe, and a beaker. This is one of the hardest things in the game to craft, honestly. Cooking pots can be crafted in your forge, or found in various kitchens, or even bought from the traders quite easily. Acid is a pain. The easiest way to get acid is to get the skill book Wasteland Treasures Volume 3. This gives you a 15% chance to get acid from wrenching vehicles, 8% chance from breaking medical equipment, or a 25% chance to get it from acid barrels, or a 50% chance to get it from these quad acid barrels. That's with wrenching specifically, I should add. If you can't find this book at all, you can occasionally buy acid again, or you can loot it from these chemical loot stations, or you can rarely find it in sinks and vehicles. It's a real pain to get without Wasteland Treasures Volume 3, but honestly, the beaker is a bigger pain in the acid times. You'll find it sometimes in end loot containers at tier 3 or higher. The other good option is poppin' pills crates, which are most commonly found in medical or science related POIs. A good early option for a chance at some acid and beakers is the Cook's Residence, which is a tier 1 POI which has several chemical loots and a couple of poppin' pills crates. Later on, this tier 3 pharmacy is absolutely filled with poppin' pills crates throughout, which are your best bet for getting a beaker. This is a little bit random, but another thing you should know how to get early on is the bicycle. It's the starter vehicle in 7 Days to Die, and it helps you get around a lot quicker than on foot, and gives you 9 extra inventory slots. The easiest way to get one without actually doing anything specific is to just do tier 1 quests. Once you've done 10 of those, you'll actually just get a bicycle for free as a quest reward. Alternatively, if you're more dead set on getting one another way, you can loot the bike parts from pass and gas containers rarely, or you can get 4 Vehicle Adventures magazines, often found in pass and gas containers in cars, and then craft the chassis and handlebars. These don't require anything special aside from a workbench, but you probably will need a wrench to gather everything up. So many things need wrenches, don't they? You'll also need wheels, which are commonly looted from cars and pass and gas containers again, or crafted using 1 acid, 24 scrap polymer, 2 oil, 3 forged iron, and 15 coal. Scrap polymer can be gotten by salvaging stuff, or by using your stone axe on plastic barrels and trash. And oil is most commonly found wrenching cars, or by looting trash and car loot. That is a lot of faff just for the worst vehicle in the game though. I just rush through tier 1 quests and take the bike that way. Before we get into the final tip, I have one tiny tip for you. If you see the open book icon on a book, that means that you have read it before, or have finished the associated skill. And if it's closed, you haven't read it, or you haven't finished the skill. That'll save you worrying about what books to sell, and what books to read. Same applies to schematics. So that leaves one thing to cover in this video, the wrench. The wrench is a salvaging tool in 7 Days to Die, but there's actually 3 of them in total, which new players often seem to get confused about. The wrench is the worst salvaging tool in the game, which is replaced later by the ratchet, which is then later replaced by the impact driver. These 3 tools do exactly the same thing, just the ratchet is better than the wrench and the impact driver is better than the ratchet. To get a wrench early on can often be troublesome. You can occasionally loot or buy them from traders, but these are once again unreliable at times. To craft one, you'll need 1 Scrapping for Fun magazine to unlock it. Scrapping for Funs are often found in pass and gas containers, which are most commonly found in gas station POIs, which are very frequent throughout the world. The wrench itself will need 12 forged iron and 4 mechanical parts, as well as 2 duct tape to craft. So a forge is likely needed, but not 100% necessary to craft a wrench. The 4 mechanical parts without a wrench can be troublesome, as I said earlier, but you can scrap an engine if you get one, or loot toolboxes, workbenches, working stiff tools crates, or indeed buy them. Today we're back in 7 Days to Die going over some tips, tricks, and advice for new and returning players. Enough yapping, let's ride. This first section is all about something called POIs, which you may have heard a lot in other 7 Days to Die videos. What it means is points of interest. POIs are these buildings that you see throughout the game as you explore. One thing every new player should know about them is that they're not actually just buildings like homes or hospitals or hardware stores, but rather every tier 1 or higher location in the game is actually a linear dungeon similar to the type you might find in various RPGs. That's right, there's pretty much one designated route through all of these locations that you're intended to go through, which usually culminates in a hard fight and a loot room. It's quite a bit like Fallout or Skyrim in that regard, even including the legendary Skyrim doors at times, which loop you back to the start of the location so you can leave quickly. There's a few reasons you should be aware of this level design strategy as a new player, particularly if you're coming from other survival games that use a more sandbox style location system. Reason 1 is that the intended route is usually going to take you through every important room in the POI and make you fight every zombie, so to avoid getting lost, missing loot, or missing zombies, going into the obvious opening of every POI, which is usually located near the quest beacon, will give you the full experience of the POI. Reason 2 is that you can break the POI sometimes by going against this route, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in bad ways. Sometimes certain zombies just won't trigger if you go the wrong way because it will miss a spawn trigger. Sometimes you can activate a spawn trigger in a way that the devs didn't intend you to and end up having a much harder fight than was intended. And sometimes these triggers can just break quest completion entirely, preventing you from finishing the mission. However, once you become familiar with all the POIs in the game, you can use their linear nature to your advantage. You can skip all the fluff and go right to the end loot if you know where that end loot is, because this game has fully destructible environments, so nothing stops you just breaking into the POI wherever you would like to. You can just skip to the final fight and get the end loot, which is quite efficient if you're just looking for better gear, or you can use the same idea midway through a POI when you know you're going to wander into a trap room. You can skip it by breaking down the POI somewhere else. As a general tip, try to avoid falling through holes in POIs. The fun pimps love to trap you in rooms with no way back out and throw zombies at you. This next tip is also about POIs. When you roll up to any building in the game, you'll see an ominous skull counter on the top right. The number of red skulls indicates the tier of the POI. Side note, the orange skulls indicate the biome you're in, with harder biomes having more orange skulls. 1 red skull means tier 1, all the way through to 5 red skulls, which is tier 5, which is the highest natural POI tier in the game as of making this video. But tier 6 quests do exist, and we'll cover those in a bit. Tier 1 POIs are pretty simple generally. They very often will only have a few zombies in them, they're very small and easy to finish, and you tend to get the worst gear out of them in these crates. Tier 2s will kick up a notch a little bit, often being larger, having more zombies, and more frequently featuring more dangerous creatures like dogs and vultures, though do be careful of these even in some tier 1s, and you get even better loot from these. At tier 3, things start to get a little bit tougher, featuring even more rooms, more zombies, and often a larger fight near the end of the POI, and you'll need to bring something to unlock the end chest, either lockpicks or a mining tool. Usually, you could also do time charges, a sledgehammer, or shotgun breaching slugs, but those are less frequently used. Tier 4s really heat up, featuring much tougher end fights and even better loot, until the final, Tier 5, which are often huge and have a lot of massive fights in them. When you first start out in the game, don't be surprised if it takes you a couple of days to complete these Tier 5s, and even if you're good at the game and can clear them efficiently, some of them still take all day just to get through. For example, the Shotgun Messiah factory is always a huge time sink. These POIs are meant to be the real tests of your skills and supplies, to say the least. You should not be going into these on day 1 if you don't know what you're doing, not just because you'll probably die, but also the loot at the end of a tier 5 POI, even in the wasteland on day 1, is going to be probably pretty shit because it's based primarily on your level. Here's an example of a day 1 level 1 character in a tier 5 wasteland POI. You get some pretty good stuff in here, but is it worth the absolute carnage you're gonna have to go through to get to it? Probably not. Unless you use the last tip I told you about and skip to the end, of course. Anyway, let's talk about those quests I mentioned earlier. So much like POI tiers, there are quest tiers. There are 6 tiers of quests which you have to unlock by doing other quests with traders. In order to unlock tier 2 quests, you will need to complete 10 tier 1s, and this continues like this at each tier. You need to do 10 of your current tier to unlock the next. However, these tiers are actually unlocked at a number value seen in your quest log. The tier of quest you do is the number it will go up by, so you don't have to do 10 of your highest quests. You can do a mix of whatever is available to you or whatever interests you. Additionally, if you join a multiplayer server late in the game and your friend drags you through a couple of tier 5s on your first day, you can complete tier 1 very quickly that way. So what are tier 6s if there's only 5 tiers of POI? Well, there is a type of quest called infestations. For each POI tier, you can take on a harder version of it called an infestation, which gives you bonus loot and has more zombies and often much harder zombies as well. So a tier 6 infestation is a tier 5 POI on steroids. They should not be taken lightly, but you will get very good loot at the end of them. While we're on the topic of quests, let's talk about the quest givers, traders. There are 5 traders in 7 Days to Die, and each one spawns exclusively in a certain biome and has a specialization. Trader Rect is the forest trader, and he specializes in food and farming. Trader Jen is in the burnt forest, and she specializes in medicine, which, by the way, because of a strange quirk of 7 Days to Die, means she actually also specializes in giving you brawling skill related stuff. This applies to all medical loot and rewards. They are for some reason polluted with various brawling skill magazines and skill books. So if you're doing that kind of build, medical loot and traders are of particular use to you, in particular Jen. Trader Bob is the desert trader, and he specializes in vehicles and tools, which makes him very useful. Trader Hugh is the snow trader, and he specializes in guns and ammo, of course, making him pretty useful as well. And Joel is the wasteland trader, and he specializes in armor. You'll be able to find each trader in that order as you complete the quest tiers I mentioned. Of course, you can just explore and find them naturally, but they will guide you in that order. Traders are, of course, very useful. They give quests which are useful as sources of XP and money, as well as giving you markers to POIs that you're probably appropriately equipped for. They also give quest rewards, which are mostly shit, to be honest. Hey, it is free stuff for things you should probably be doing anyway, and naturally, being traders, they sell a bunch of useful stuff, and you can sell stuff to them, and every duke you make from selling is actually a point of XP to you, so selling a bunch of high tier gear after a high level quest can be an excellent way to get that little bit more XP from each quest. Like game stage and loot stage, which I explained in the previous video, trader stage also exists and is governed by your level and your rank in the Daring Adventurer perk, as well as the quest tier you have unlocked. If you max Daring Adventurer, they'll give you plus 40 levels worth of trader stage, which isn't bad. Additionally, you will get a small modifier for each tier you have completed at the traders. I think it's 5% per tier, so that can help a little bit as well. Oh, and by the way, on randomly generated maps or the pre-gen maps, there are often more than one of each of the traders in their biomes. You can find 4 or 5 of the same trader in one biome in some larger maps, so you can find 5 trader Rex all living in different towns. So you may want to find all of them for their various uses. Also, as a side note, trader compounds are completely immune to zombie damage, and you're allowed to stay in there as long as you want during the day, although you will be kicked out at night. So if something really bad happens, you can definitely run to the traders, close the door behind you, and run away through the other end of the compound. The zombies will never catch you, and the traders can't die if you let the zombies in, so you're safe. The last trader related tip in today's video is about challenges. If you go over to the same screen where you did the tutorial, you can find 2 pages of challenges. When you finish these rows of challenges, or in some case just for completing individual challenges, you'll get a quest to get a reward from the trader. For most of these, you will get a selection of skill books to choose from, which is pretty helpful for your progression for things that aren't exactly difficult to do for the most part. However, the zombie kills ones, which are kind of difficult in some cases, are particularly excellent, often giving you rare mods for your armor or weapons and huge amounts of ammo to choose from. So definitely check out these challenges and make sure you're redeeming them as you go. Most of the first page is pretty easy to complete, and a huge amount of the challenges on the second page give you piles of XP for doing basically nothing, like the entering certain biome challenges or finding trader challenges. Let's cover something to help you in combat. Wooden spikes, the weapon of mass destruction. The final word in the great arms race against the zombie menace. You see, you can make them relatively cheaply and place them wherever you go at a moment's notice. And not only will they damage zombies and animals very efficiently, but they'll also slow them down. So when you're being chased by something you shouldn't have aggroed, like a boar before you have a good weapon, or if you want to thin out a bunch of zombies, wooden spikes are the secret to always rigging the game in your favor. Now there is one major downside: you don't get the XP for any kills the traps secure on their own, but being alive is far more efficient for your XP bar than getting 100% of the XP from all the kills you get. But if you can try and make sure you get the final hit on most zombies, that would be optimal. Let's move on to another early game damage dealing strat: Molotovs and pipe bombs. Molotovs are a very easy source of damage early on that you can loot pretty commonly in the first few days. You can technically craft them, but it's rarely worth the ingredients to do it. One thing you should remember though is that you can set yourself on fire with Molotovs, so keep water on you to douse the flames. You just do that by using water and it'll stop the fire damage. The other weapon I mentioned, pipe bombs, are arguably much more useful. Pipe bombs require a couple of magazines and a workbench to get set up, but once you unlock them, they can be very easily crafted using just gunpowder, iron pipes, and plant fiber, making them some of the most easily accessed explosives in the game. And for the amount of gunpowder they take, they are a very efficient source of damage. You can hold them while the fuse is lit, time your throws to essentially make them simple impact grenades, and they can be absolutely devastating on horde nights. There's no reason not to craft them as soon as you get access to the magazines you need and a workbench. Before we get into this ranking of the best perks in 7 Days to Die, I just want to clarify that we're not including weapon damage perks, because obviously pretty much every weapon perk is going to be the top priority of every playthrough, and if I was including them, the list would be almost entirely just a list of 7 weapon perks, which feels pretty uninteresting. So we're going to be ranking the top 7 best perks in 7 Days to Die aside from weapon damage perks, and we're actually going to start with an honorable mention that would be very high on the list if not for one small thing. Our honorable mention is an interesting one: charismatic nature. The effects of this intellect perk are: allies and party members heal 50% faster, do 20% more damage and block damage, take 10% less damage, take half damage from bleed and stop bleeding twice as fast, find 20% better loot, and gain +1 to all their attributes. That is an extremely good effect to be able to potentially give a large amount of players. However, it only gets an honorable mention as despite being one of the best multiplayer perks, it is completely useless in single player. It does nothing whatsoever and is a complete waste of 5 perk points. So for being worthless in arguably the most popular game mode in 7 Days to Die, I can only give it an honorable mention. On to the main list with number 7. Number 7 is Run and Gun. Run and Gun is an underrated agility perk. At level 5, it will give you 25% better hipfire accuracy, which is pretty good on its own, as you can very easily configure weapons to be pretty much pinpoint accurate with hip firing in this game, so it's actually worth ever doing. The main benefit though is the removal of the run speed modifier when reloading. It's such a minor thing in theory, but it really does translate to much more fluid gameplay in practice, really allowing you, as the name suggests, to run and gun. You can sprint around while reloading and it won't slow you down to a crawl. It's one of those things that you just have to feel to really get, but it has saved my life countless times, and it makes fighting hordes without a base much more easy, which is a fun way to handle them if you don't like base building. The reason I could only give this number 7 though is because of the 2.0 perk padding debacle, where they made most of the perks cost 5 skill points to fully level up, whereas several of these perks were much cheaper. For example, Run and Gun used to just be 3 ranks, which was much more worthwhile because it had essentially the exact same effect for less skill points. It's still very good though. Salvage operations. Salvage ops gives you 100% more resources when salvaging with salvaging tools, and it gives you 50% more damage with them. And it reduces your stamina usage by 25% for light attacks and 50% for heavy attacks with salvaging tools. This is on my list because it is one of the better perks for making money in 7 Days to Die, and you can sell a lot of the stuff you gather from salvaging for a lot of money. And since selling also happens to be an excellent way to level quickly, salvage ops will help you level faster from all that salvaging as well. It's also worth noting that salvage operations will allow you to mine decently efficiently with just your salvaging tool, and motherload does apply in this context, so you don't lose out on any material if you have that perk. Mining tools are obviously a little bit better and more efficient for it, but honestly it's not bad in a pinch as an alternative to Miner 69er. This perk is a must-have in most of my playthroughs. Miner 69er. Miner 69er is a strength perk which gives you 150% more block damage with mining tools like the axe, shovels, and picks, and it gives you the stamina reduction I mentioned from salvage ops already. I went back and forth on which is better between Miner 69er and salvage operations. While salvage operations essentially operates as both Miner 69er and motherload but for salvaging, mining has this effect split between 3 perks in Miner 69er, motherload, and junk miner. So salvage operations is definitely the more skill point efficient option. Ultimately, I think Miner 69er is more useful though if you build bases or craft ammo and explosives at least. Miner 69er is the obvious choice as it makes collecting raw resources used for that much easier. It also makes mining a much more tolerable mechanic, so I often prioritize it. The downside is that you will need 2 other perks to fully maximize this playstyle. My decision between the 2 though did ultimately come down to the versatility of the trees they live in. In my opinion, strength is better than perception, so Miner 69er just gets the edge here barely. Fortitude Mastery. Fortitude Mastery will give you the ability to stop bleeds by killing enemies, and after recovering from infections you become immune for 2 hours. Fist weapons also gain a 10% chance to give you gold or silver on kills, and the real benefit, 100 more max health. I'm not gonna lie, most of this perk is absolute cheeks, minor quality of life improvements at best. But I can't argue with 100 more max health. If you average it out to basically 20 more health per skill point invested, that's a pretty good perk. The one issue it really has is being in Fortitude, which just isn't that fantastic of a playstyle for anyone who likes progressing quickly or having resources easily. But you do get really good combat skills at least, though as always when it comes to attributes that do almost nothing outside of combat, agility is the better one because half its perks aren't useless passive effects that never do anything useful. Aside from living in easily my least favourite tree, Fortitude Mastery is a very good perk for 100 levels worth of extra health. Strength Mastery. This gives you 100% faster healing of critical injuries while holding mining tools, a 5% chance to get brass when mining tools do 50% more damage to zombies, sledgehammers and clubs have an additional 50% dismemberment chance on headshots, and you get 25% damage resistance upon kills with any strength weapon, including shotguns. This perk is busted. It's stupid. Just what even were they thinking? Clubs and sledgehammers are already arguably the best melee weapons in the game, and giving them an even higher dismemberment chance and 25% damage resistance on kills is absolutely unreal. This perk genuinely fucking perplexes me. Let's look at how busted this is in like a perspective here. The crit healing effect serves as a much more skill point efficient version of healing factor with none of the food drain issues that perk has. The 5% chance to get brass when mining destroys the only weakness strength builds have historically had, which is having a harder time getting brass. Now your miner can get all the resources underground and never really bother with perception. And then it gives you a decapitation bonus on par with an additional 10 levels of strength. This single perk allows strength builds to basically be worth twice what any other attributes are, and allows you to be fully bullet crafting self-sufficient with one attribute, and it completely rips off 2 fortitude perks in pain tolerance and healing factor in a fraction of the perk costs, while being in a better tree. Why is strength like this? Does it have something to do with one of the main devs of this game being obsessed with weightlifting? Yeah, it's probably that now that I think about it. This is what happens when you give a gym bro a game engine. Anyway, on to number 2. parkour. It lets you jump 3 blocks high, which is unbelievably good. It also removes the ability to ever break or sprain your legs from falls, which is extremely good if you're anything like me. And as of 2.0, it just completely turns off fall damage. This paired with a run-and gun from earlier means that zombies will never be able to hit you, which is arguably better than any health or damage resistance boosts you could get otherwise. It's also just really fun and really useful for building as well. This feels somewhat underwhelming compared to all the fanfare I gave Strength Mastery, but I do stand by its placement above it. Strength Mastery makes an already very powerful skill tree more ridiculous in all the ways it was already kind of ridiculous. This actually opens up a new playstyle that, in my opinion, makes the game more enjoyable. For that, it will always be my GOAT, despite being number 2 on this list. Number 1. Intellect Mastery. 20% less vehicle damage and fuel use, a 25% chance to find books, schematics, or magazines in damn near every container in the game, a 50% chance to get 2 skill points when reading those skill magazines, which can be combined with the nerd outfit for a 100% chance, effectively halving the amount of skill magazines you need to find, making progression effectively take half as long, and it makes it so that the stun baton is always charged. This perk makes progression completely a joke. You prioritize this perk and you'll unlock the ability to craft literally everything in the game by like day 10. It's so effective it actually killed my first 2.0 playthrough in its tracks because I was just done by day 17. I had everything. I had level 6 guns, I had a gyrocopter, and this was only taking that perk on like day 12. The stun baton boost is also really useful if you're actually using the stun baton, allowing every hit to be a devastating stun attack which can apply to a group of enemies. You basically turn the zombies off with a well-built stun baton build. Again, to such an extent that the game just stops being any fun at all. Now, you could argue that a perk that makes the game unbearable to play would be rated badly, not at number 1. But I know why most people are watching these videos. They want things that are good, that are going to absolutely ruin their game. And I believe in your right to make that choice, but don't say I didn't warn you when your playthrough ends almost instantly when you take this perk. Today, we're going to be going over how to get the best loot in 7 Days to Die, but I do have to give you an unfortunate forewarning about loot in this game. 7 Days to Die is heavily RNG based for its loot. There's no like, go to this POI, find this amazing item, go have a sick playthrough. In fact, there are very few guaranteed spawning items in this game at all. Instead, we're going to go over how 7 Days to Die distributes loot, and how you can master the mechanic to get amazing gear as soon as physically possible. Let's jump in. Loot stage is this game's number value for deciding what loot tables give you. The higher the loot stage, the more of the higher level gear you'll find and the less of the weaker stuff. The magic number you want to hit in 7 Days to Die 2.0 is 205. You can find your loot stage number in this menu showed on screen. Base value of your loot stage is dependent on your level. If you're level 40 with no other boosts, you'll be loot stage 40. So yes, without any deliberate effort on your part, it will take until level 205 to actually hit the loot cap that you want to hit, where the best loot spawns. Naturally, that's extremely slow. So what can you do to improve your loot stage and thus hit 205 faster? Well, let's cover the biggest thing first. Biomes have different loot stage modifiers in 7 Days to Die. The harder the biome, the higher the modifier, thus the better loot you will find. The Burned Forest is plus 50% plus 5, which means that your level 40 character here will be loot stage 65. The Desert is 100% plus 10, taking us to 90. Snow is 150% plus 15, which brings us to 115. The Wasteland is 200% plus 20, which brings us to 140. So naturally, the first thing you should do if you want the best loot is go to the Wasteland. But do be aware that each of these biomes also carries a significant increase to your game stage, which is the mechanic that makes the game harder. So when you go there, there will be more high-level zombies. It's a risk versus reward thing. And the best risk versus reward is the Wasteland. Another useful mechanic to know though is the POI loot stage modifiers. In 7 Days to Die, there are 5 tiers of POI. POI tier is indicated by the number of red skulls you see at the top of your screen. Tier 1 gives a 5% plus 3, so our level 40 character becomes loot stage 45 in a tier 1 in the forest. Tier 2 gives plus 10% plus 6, so now we get to 50. Tier 3 gives 15% plus 9, so now we're 55. Tier 4 gives plus 20% plus 12, so now we're 60. And Tier 5 gives plus 25% plus 15, so now we're 65. What about in the Wasteland though? Well, here our level 40 survivor goes from 40 to 140 for just going to the Wasteland, and then you go to 165 for being in a tier 5 POI, with each tier being about 5 points less below that. So the POI is helpful, but if you want to go for a tier 4 over a tier 5 because they're more common and much easier and time efficient, that's not going to be a huge loss of loot stage for you. But our level 40 survivor is only at a max of 165. What can we do to get to 205? Let's find out. So first we have the scavenger armor or the rogue hood. Each of these will give you a 20% boost to loot stage. Obviously though, the singular level 6 rogue hood is easier to get and carry around than carrying around a full set of scavenger armor at level 6. For the exact same effect. So 99 times out of 100 just go for the hood unless you were planning on wearing the scavenger armor anyway. This takes our level 40 Wasteland tier 5 character up to 198 already. If we can find a treasure hunter helmet mod, that'll give you plus 5 loot stage, which after all the modifiers will actually take us to 204. And to be clear, 204 and 205 have no major differences, so functionally you're pretty much there at the loot cap and can find the best gear quite easily. So theoretically, what's the lowest level we can hit that loot cap? Well, let's cover some other loot stage boosting stuff and see how low we can go. Eye candy can be bought at the vending machines and gives a plus 5 plus 10% bonus for 6 minutes when consumed. On top of that, we also have the Lucky Looter perk in the General Perks tab. This perk will give you plus 25% loot stage, which is very, very significant, but it does cost 10 skill points, and considering how low of a level we might be able to hit this loot cap, 10 skill points might be a significant investment for your character. It might be damn near half your skill points. That said, you can always refund your skill points with Forgotten elixirs you buy from the trader, so you're never stuck with these perks having wasted the points. There is also Charismatic Nature rank 5 in the Intellect tree. This will give your allies a 20% boost to loot stage, but not you in single player, so that's something worth considering if you're playing on your own. So with all those things combined, what's the lowest level we can get to loot stage 205? So with the Wasteland in a tier 5 POI with Eye Candy, a treasure hunter mod, 5 ranks of Lucky Looter and a level 6 rogue hood, I was able to get to loot stage 205 at level 27. Now that's really, really good. If you put your mind to it, you can actually hit that in the first week. Not even all that hard, meaning by day 7 you could be looting amazing gear. So that's the hypothetical earliest point in single player at least. You can actually go earlier in multiplayer as well if someone has maxed out Charismatic Nature, but what's a more realistic approach? Tier 5s in the Wasteland with half your skill points invested in one skill and level 6 armor pieces before level 27 is pretty unrealistic for most players. So what's a more balanced approach that the average player can probably replicate without having to fully min-max? Well, let's go to a tier 4 in the Wasteland for a start, but with no rogue hood or a treasure hunter or the Lucky Looter perk. We do have Eye Candy, as that is very easily accessible. With this, we'll only be loot stage 135 at level 27, so that's not enough for what we need. If we do, however, throw in a relatively easy to unlock or loot level 3 rogue hood, we could get a boost of 6% up to 143. Still not quite enough. If you could then find the treasure hunter mod, it would go up by 5 more. That's still, again, not enough. So what level do we need to be to hit 205 now with this setup? Well, we can hit 204, which as I said is perfectly acceptable for this, at level 42 if we have the treasure hunter mod, or level 44 without it. So a good compromise if you don't want to get the full maxed out rogue hood or maxed out Lucky Looter is Wasteland, tier 4 POIs, Eye Candy, level 3 or better rogue hood, and being level 42 with the treasure hunter helmet mod, or level 44 without it. You can definitely see the rogue hood and Lucky Looter have big impacts here, as it's over 10 levels earlier, but that's not that much different in playtime really. Now beyond 205 is more or less not useful to you. If you find yourself able to hit very high loot stages at any point, feel free to just go to a safer biome or a lower level POI and keep yourself as close to 205 as possible while minimizing the risk. there's no reason necessarily to go through the extra difficulty of the Wasteland if you're level 60 or something and are already hitting loot stage 205 in the snow biome, for example. Now, there's a little more to loot than just hitting the magic 205. Let's talk about the other significant loot stage numbers that may be of use to you. For example, maybe you're not interested in going straight to tier 3 guns as soon as possible, but you want to get past all the wooden shit as soon as possible. Don't worry, I got you. There are 4 loot stage tiers in 7 Days to Die. Tier 0, 1, 2, and 3. Tier 0 is all the primitive stuff like stone axes and wooden clubs. Tier 1 is iron tier weapons and tools, as well as tier 1 guns, which are like the pistol, the AK, the double barrel, and the hunting rifle. Tier 2 is steel tools and weapons, and the tier 2 guns, which are the tactical assault rifle, lever action rifle, magnum, and tactical assault rifle. And then tier 3 is your motor tools like the auger, and tier 3 guns like the sniper rifle, auto shotgun, SMG, desert vulture, and M60. Those are the major tiers that you need to keep in mind, and here is where these tiers basically are most relevant in the loot stage. You start off in tier 0. For tier 1 stuff, you will start unlocking it at loot stage 39, but it will peak at 125. For tier 2, this will start happening at loot stage 80 and will peak at 164. And for tier 3, you want to get loot stage 118 to 205, as we said earlier. Keep those milestones in mind for deciding what items you want to use. For this last section, we're going to talk about the best POIs that you should probably hit for your loot, as well as one other thing I almost forgot about in this video, which is perks outside of Lucky Looter, which affect the loot you get. First thing you should know is that basically every high level gun you want to get can spawn in a tier 1 wooden crate to some extent. But it is more likely that you will get what is called a leveled item, or more than one leveled item, out of tier 3, 4, and 5 loot. And a leveled item is basically the things you probably clicked on for this video, so something like your gun. So the game might decide that it wants to give you a handgun, for example, and the type of handgun you will get is based off of your loot stage. So if you're low, you'll get a level 1 pipe pistol. If you're high, that will be a level 5 desert vulture with a little bit of random chance in between there. The way you can influence the loot tables is by taking perks related to the tool, weapon, or maybe the piece of armor that you want. And armor is kind of shaky because there's no way to specifically find the armor you want, but you can increase the chances of armor spawning. But for example, if you want to find more machine guns in loot, then put points in the machine gunner perk. Now, it's relatively well known, of course, that you get more machine gun parts and machine gun books from doing this, but it does also increase the amount of actual weapons related to the skill that you find in loot as well, such that taking 1 rank of these perks will double your chances of finding that specific weapon. And if you take 5 ranks, it will actually 10 times the chance that you find that weapon. So if you're trying to get, say, a level 6 M60, get your loot stage up to 205, loot any tier 3, 4, and 5 POIs. You can get it out of tier 1s, but it's more likely out of the higher level POIs, and your loot stage will be higher there, so it'll be easier as well. And then max out the gun skill that you want to increase the chances that it's the specific weapon you are looking for. And as one additional note you should be aware of, if you specifically want to get guns, first of all, any gun rack that you might find in gun stores or police stations are good, but another good option is actually police cars. And police cars are actually unique in 7 Days to Die in that they are the only container in the game that actually abides by the old 7 Days to Die myth. And if you don't know the old 7 Days to Die myth, it was that you got better loot by lock-picking containers compared to breaking them open. This is completely untrue for every single container except for the very recent addition, the police car. If you break your way into police cars, not only will you be attacked by a massive horde of zombies, you will also get worse loot. So if you can, do use lockpicks on police cars, and these have a very high chance of spawning gun related loot, which means they're an excellent way to get high level guns, which also includes, by the way, the robotic turret and the robotic drone. So yeah, with all that information, you should now know how to get your loot stage up, where to go, and what POIs to hit to get the best loot, and what perks you need to take to adjust the specific items you want to get. 7 Days to Die 2.5 just dropped on PC, and it came with a bunch of amazing survival features to enhance the game in ways we haven't seen in years. Today we're going to be covering those new mechanics and all the tips tips and tricks to help you survive in this new, much more brutal sandbox. Starting with tip number 1, temperature. Temperature has come back in 7 Days to Die with a vengeance. You can see the ambient temperature at any given time below your compass at the top of the screen. By the way, this is the new UI for 7 Days to Die 2.5, this is not a mod. Depending on the biome and the time of day, the temperature will fluctuate. Your player also has a temperature stat of their own, and you can use things like fire or clothing to increase your resistance to temperatures. Forest is pretty easy to survive in, but be careful early in the morning and late at night, especially if it rains, especially at the start of the game. Rain makes you wet, which massively decreases your character's core temperature, so always try to keep a torch on you in the forest, or indeed the snow biome. Holding a torch will give you 20 cold resist, helping you keep on moving in the cold forest rainstorms. Coffee can give you an additional 5%, and if you're in the snow biome or if it's just a particularly cold night, sitting next to any kind of warm fire will give you a 20% bonus to your cold resistance. Forges, campfires, burning barrels, and chemistry stations all give this effect, but it does not stack. The burning shaft mod will give you an additional 20% cold resistance as well, allowing you to swap out your torch for a melee weapon later on. There's also 3 tiers of insulated liner mods that you can find in the game, which give you more heat and cold resistance that can be modded onto regular armor. And there's even a new clothing system that I'll cover in a later tip. None of the original vanilla armors give any temperature resistance of their own. In the desert, where heat is at its worst, the easiest way to cool down is to get wet, which massively increases your heat resistance. But also yucca juice smoothies will increase your heat resistance by 10% as well. Otherwise, there's not actually a lot of ways you can reduce heat other than wearing better clothes and more mods to deal with it. So what does temperature do? Well, when you're cold, you'll use 100% more food over time and increase food consumption when regenerating stamina by 30%. And your movement speed will be reduced by 10%. When you're really freezing, this goes up to 200% more food over time and 60% more food when consuming stamina, as well as a 20% movement penalty. This can and will get you killed if you're not careful. When you're hot, you'll use 300% more water to regen stamina, and movement is reduced by 10%. And when you're sweltering, you'll use 600% more of water to regenerate stamina, and your movement is indeed reduced by 20% as well. So naturally, when you're in the snow, try to compensate with extra food, and when you're in the desert, try to compensate with extra water. All of this is actually independent of biome progressions, so becoming immune to the effects of each biome will not protect you from the storms or the temperature, and becoming immune to the temperature will not make you to the biomes, and becoming immune to... you get it. They're not interchangeable, they are 3 different hazards you need to be aware of. Speaking of storms, number 2 is storms and how to avoid or survive them. Storms have been picked up a notch since 2.0. The zombies are now much more aggressive and move faster when a storm happens, and combined with extreme temperature fluctuations which can reduce your movement speed, it can end really badly for you if you go in unprepared, which I learned the fun way. The easiest way to avoid a storm is to look out for the new, pretty good looking distant storms. They're pretty noticeable, actually. You should never be surprised by a storm in another biome though. Failing that, you can always just get indoors and hide, or indeed leave the biome. Later on, with the clothing I mentioned, you can survive out there for much longer. However, the zombies will still be cranked up in their aggression, but to assist with that, they will also drop more loot bags during the storms. Oh, and as a pro tip, which might be patched in the future, if you are ever dealing with a storm or a biome hazard that you just don't have any way to deal with and you're not near a building, you can always just surround yourself in wooden frames and become completely immune to storms and biome effects and rebuild your resistance for a little bit, and then you can keep moving. Using that, you can cross any biome at any stage, and it will also reset your biome hazard effects. However, it is incredibly tedious to do. The only way to completely remove biome hazard effects is to create the respective biome gear, which can be completed by doing all of that biomes challenges in the challenge menu, and you can never become fully immune to storms. Number 3, the smell system. As if that wasn't enough new ways to die, we also have the smell system. When you hold a piece of raw meat, you radiate a smell. This will attract zombies who will run faster and notice you from further away. The more meat you hold, the more severe this distance will be, up to 100 meters. If you use the new meat bundles with paper and plant fibers, you can disable the smell of up to 5 pieces of meat with 1 crafting recipe, but you can do it to all of the meat in your inventory, just to be clear. Also, storing the meat in any way will also stop this being a problem. Additionally, killing an animal now attracts nearby zombies in a radius of what looks to be about 100 meters, so you will have to be ready to fight for your kill now. Additionally, eating almost All food types will now have a smell value. These don't trigger by being in your inventory though, they're triggered by eating them. You eat a can of pears? Well, you better be ready to incur a 25 meters zombie smell penalty, where zombies within 25 meters will be more aggressive towards you. This radius will decrease over time though. You can also remove it by completely submerging yourself in water, aka bathing, or by going indoors, which reduces the range by 80%. These effects can all stack up to 100 meters, so if you eat like 4 cans of pears, be prepared for a lot of zombies to come after you if you're outside. Generally, the better the food, the bigger the radius, so if you're trying to be stealthy, raw vegetables generate no smell when eaten and can be used to regen food and health without attracting attention. Oh, and because this game is perfectly balanced with no flaws, Scorcher Stew, an extremely powerful food item, can be just made at any point in the game because it's a snow biome special item. And currently, it has no smell value or recipe requirements, so you can just instantly start making these, assuming you have all the ingredients, and they have absolutely no downsides. By the way, if you're finding this video helpful, please consider hitting that subscribe button for more. I'm going to be covering 2.5 pretty extensively. Number 4, third person mode. Third person mode has finally been added, and it can be enabled by the change camera button, which you can find in the movement tab of your keybinds menu. It was disabled by default for me, but I was playing during the experimental. However, I set mine to V, which I found to be very convenient. But there's actually a lot of options to customize here. You can set the field of view for your third person camera. You can set the mode, which includes free mode, which will allow your camera to always freely rotate around you in third person. There's locked mode, which will make sure your character always faces where you're aiming, best for people who are worried about combat of course, and locked ranged only will make it so that you are only facing where you're aiming when you're using a ranged weapon, but when you're using a melee weapon or no weapons at all, you can free aim. There's also a camera distance setting, allowing you to put your camera as close or far away from your character as you like. Additionally, there is also a switch shoulder button, which was middle mouse for me, and this also now does incremental zooms on scopes. If you dislike third person, you can of course just not use it, but if you're worried about PvP servers and stuff, you can tell your server admins to disable the ability to go into third person, because that is a server-wide setting now. And indeed, if you wanted to all be locked into third person, that is also an option. Number 5, apiaries. Apiaries are the brand new workstation that generates honey at a rate of 1 every 2 days. Think of it like a dew collector that produces honey. However, you will need to give it 10 flowers in order for it to generate 1 honey, so that can be goldenrod, chrysanthemum, or cotton. To unlock it, you'll need workstations level 30, and it takes 10 wood, 50 nails, 10 forged iron, 8 duct tape, and 5 beeswax. Beeswax is most easily found by destroying tree stumps and in loot bags dropped by the rancher zombies, previously known as the plague spitters. The apiary actually has a pretty high chance of spawning bees when you access them, so you'll want to leave them alone as much as possible. If you want to disable the angry bee feature, you will need to craft a smoker, which is unlocked at workstations 56. Also at workstations 44, you can unlock the brood box, which will double the amount of honey you produce each time, and at 40 you can unlock the extractor, which increases how often honey is produced. All 3 lets you get a whole lot of honey. As a side note, by the way, the dew collector is now slightly harder to craft, and it takes a higher level of workstations to craft, and you can now craft all of the tool components for the dew collector, including the water filter. You no longer have to fully rely on the trader for any of these things, which is a very good change in my opinion, because I don't particularly enjoy when I'm forced to rely on traders for certain things. Number 6 is all the new honey recipes. If you were wondering why you would even need all this honey, well now you're gonna know. Honey got buffed substantially and is used in 3 more recipes, including a drink, the honey tea, and 2 food items, honey glazed sham and honey brisket, which I spelt as brickset because apparently I was thinking of Lego websites at the time. Honey tea is basically a goldenrod tea with a small amount of food and a 5% infection cure that you unlock at food 14. It's basically goldenrod tea plus honey combined in recipe and effects, which is convenient. Honey glazed sham is a very powerful food item unlocked at 59 food, and the recipe is again pretty easy and the stats are very good, and also cure infection pretty effectively. Honey brisket is unlocked at food level 80. It's pretty much the best food in the game now, and it's very easy to make, all things considered, though not as easy as Scorcher Stew, being able to be crafted out of entirely farmable ingredients and animal fat, which is pretty easy to get huge amounts of anyway, because you can get it from damn near every roadkill in the game. So get those apiaries and start making a lot more honey, because it's good for you. Number 7, vehicle storage. all of the vehicles in 7 Days to Die gained an additional column's worth of slots of storage, which means basically the bicycle got 1 new storage slot and the 4x4 got like 9. On top of that, there is now a vehicle storage mod, which is unlocked with its own schematic, just like the other vehicle mods. These give you 10 more inventory slots on each vehicle you put them on, but you can actually put 2 on each vehicle, so you can now have a 30 slot bicycle or a 110 slot 4x4. The mod schematic is found in the same place as the other vehicle mod schematics, and it's pretty much dirt cheap to craft. So congratulations, your car now has a backpack. Number 8. Clothing. Clothing can be found in various clothing or loot containers in 7 Days to Die now. These go under your armor and unfortunately give no visual effects. They include the cap liner, the long underwear, the gloves, and the socks. All they do is increase your resistance to cold and heat. They come in 3 tiers, tattered, patchwork, and thermal core, and these increase your temperature resistance, and they also have quality as well, but they do not degrade or need to be repaired. It's a bit of a tangent. This is a fun step in the right direction of bringing back the much more in-depth clothing system we used to have prior to 1.0, but I do think it's a little bit oversimplified in my opinion. There's no clothing crafting, there's no hot weather or cold weather or radiation resistant specific clothing, making it all extremely linear and pretty uninteresting. Hopefully they just give this a little bit more depth in future. Number 9, jar refunds. Jars have returned to 7 Days to Die after 3 years after a surprising amount of outcry from the community. But by default, you'll always eat a jar every time you consume a jarred product. If you'd like to get those jars back, that is something you have to customize in these settings here. This allows you to keep it at 0% for the people who prefer the more recent mechanics and less inventory clutter, and you can set it up to 100% for the people who want jars to be the way they were for like a decade before this. But you can also set it to any number in between if you just enjoy havoc and destruction. You weird little occasional jar eating freak. And number 10, we have the turret ammo changes. You can now load alternate ammos to the SMG turret and shotgun turret. They can use high power and AP rounds in the SMG and breaching slugs and AP slugs in the shotgun turret. High power rounds do about 10% more damage than normal rounds, and AP rounds now ignore about 50% of the target armor and do about 20% more damage. Currently, the AP ammo in the turrets does not do target penetration, meaning they can't hit 2 or 3 enemies with one shot, but that might change in the future. One of the things that I often see get new players killed in 7 Days to Die is not understanding the differences between the zombies. There's several different classes of zombies even within just the basic type of zombies, so if you don't know them, you can find yourself neck deep in a bad time. So let's jump in and go over some tips and tricks related to zombies in 7 Days to Die. Here we see the basic zombies. Humble, low threat, weak. But you should know that just because these are all just basic zombies doesn't mean that they're all created equally. These zombies generally have slightly less health, run faster, and do the lowest damage, a base of 10 on Nomad difficulty. These are usually not too much of a threat, but you do have to worry about them on faster run speeds because they're so fast compared to the others. Now these are what I'm going to call tough zombies. These guys generally walk a little bit slower and have a little bit more health than the light zombies, but they still only do a base of 10 damage. Then we have the heavy zombies. These often have twice as much health as the lighter zombies and deal twice as much damage. 20 on Nomad. Within this class, I'd say there's also 2 small subclasses. The basic heavy zombies, the Big Mama and the Tourist, are very slow but high health and high damage. But the really scary ones are these 2. If you play with high run speeds, these 2 will be your worst nightmare because they can spawn anywhere on the first day, despite them having double health, double damage, and the Biker has 20% armor. These 2 are always going to be your biggest concerns at the very start of a high difficulty game. At higher game stages and at night, you will find feral zombies. These are variations of all the zombies we just saw, but they are identified by their glowing orange eyes. These zombies always run, even during the day, unless you set it so they don't. They have twice the health of their non-feral variants and deal double damage, so basic ferals do 20 damage and heavy ferals do 40 damage. That means that on insane difficulty, a heavy feral can do 100 damage per hit. If that wasn't bad enough, they have a 30% resistance to dismemberment, making decapitations that much harder. Radiated zombies once again spawn at even higher game stages and spawn in all the variants of the previous zombies. These zombies have almost twice as much health as even the ferals, but they do only do about the same damage as the ferals. However, they do have 60% resistance to dismemberment, as well as resistance to knockback, flinching, knockdowns, and other crowd control effects. They can be pretty hard to stop if you don't have a good gun, but along with that, they also have regenerating health. However, you can counter this with the radiation remover modification on your weapon, which will disable their health regeneration for 90 seconds. Charge zombies spawn at even higher game stages, and they generally only spawn in sort of the lighter half of the zombies in variants. They run faster than all the other zombies, and they have about 20% more health compared to radiated zombies, and they do 60 base damage. They do about 150 block damage per hit, which is significantly more than regular zombies, which means they're very good at tearing down buildings, and they also have resistance to stun effects in that they wear off much faster when used on them. Infernal zombies actually take a damage hit compared to charged zombies. They do 45 damage, but they do 250 block damage, which is huge. They can absolutely shred any building you put between them and you. Infernal zombies have about 50% more health than basic radiated zombies. They're also considerably more resistant to knockdown effects, and are even resistant to fire, although that doesn't come up much by the time they spawn. Fortunately, they are generally quite slow, only really coming in the heavy zombie variants. They do, as well, inherit the resistances and healing effects of radiated zombies, and yes, the rad remover does work on charged and infernal zombies, and the nomad gloves also work on these two zombies. That was all the basic forms of zombies, and I wasn't sure where to put this tip, but we're going to cover zombie animals. First, the dog. Dogs are annoying little shits, I'm sure you're very aware, but they're most easily beaten simply by having a gun. But there are a few things to keep in mind when fighting them to stay on top. First, you can often tell one is near by seeing a kennel or a dog cage. You can't always be 100% sure a dog is near, but when you see one of these, always assume there is a dog. Next, there is the jingle of their collars that can be heard very distinctly compared to a lot of other noises in the game. When you hear it, you probably want to get yourself to a powerful position. And last, the dogs can't climb ladders, so climb ladders. Zombie vultures can be found on rooftops, on horde nights, and flying around in the burnt, forest, desert, and wasteland. Did you know, though, that wild ones flying around will just leave you alone if you stay healed up? They only attack you when you take damage, so if you want to be left alone, just keep your health up. The ones on rooftops will always attack, same with horde night vultures. And one important thing to note about vultures as well is that on horde nights, if you try and use a vehicle, the game will spawn a load of vultures that will be given a speed boost to attack you in the vehicle to discourage you from just driving away from the horde, basically. Additionally, be careful of the late game radiated vulture. They may seem visually identical to the normal ones, but zoom out a little bit and yeah, you can see the difference. They have an acid spit attack, which is why it's important to have walls surrounding your late game horde bases, because you don't want to get damage from the side or above, although they seem to have a hard time attacking downwards with it very effectively. As far as I've ever seen, rad vultures only spawn on horde nights. Zombie dire wolves are absolute nightmares. Do not let them hit you. On any high difficulty, they are often a one-hit kill for most of the game. They have the same weakness as dogs though, in that they can't climb ladders, so it's often quite easy to outmaneuver them. Additionally, they often drop red loot bags, which have crazy good loot. There are also zombie bears, which are basically the same as dire wolves, but with even more health, and they are guaranteed to spawn in a few POIs, particularly any POI which directly references a bear in its name. The bear den, that has two of them. Kodiak construction, guess what lives in the basement? A bear, yes. A Kodiak is a type of bear that lives in Alaska, if you were unaware. What can I say about the zombie bear except get the biggest gun you can and stand as far away as possible and hope for the best. Then we have Grace, a giant zombie boar. She's honestly not all that different from zombie bears though, really. Both of these have a very good chance of dropping red loot bags. Alright, so on to the first truly specialised individual type of zombie, the cop. Cops are basically just like tourists as far as basic stats go, but they come with a tremendously annoying ability to spit at you. Now for basic cops, this is little more than a simple ranged attack, and then ferals is just a higher damage, wider spread one. Where this starts to get absolutely unhinged is with radiated and infernal cops. The radiated cop has a large amount of projectiles to such an extent that if you're even somewhat restricted in movement when it attacks you, you're probably going to lose a lot of health. And Infernals take this even further with having an absurdly devastating ranged attack. On Insane, it can be upwards of 400 damage. If you see an Infernal cop, genuinely just find the largest room you can, if not run straight outside, to even stand a chance of not getting wiped out by this attack. Just get as far away from them as possible, especially on higher difficulties. They also have an additional annoying effect of exploding when they reach half health. This can be quite devastating if it hits you, and it can also devastate bases if you let it happen a lot on Horde nights. On the plus side, this cop pop, as I call it, also damages zombies, so you can leverage it to your advantage, assuming your base isn't at risk. Also, they make a heartbeat sound when they're about to explode, so you'll have some time to run away or kill it before it does explode, and stop that from happening. Cops are actually kind of underrated in how dangerous they are. I have about 4,000 hours in this game, and I don't often die these days, and I honestly don't even come close to dying most of the time when I play, even on insane difficulty, but when it does happen, it's usually a radiated or infernal cop more than anything else. There are 4 biome-specific zombies and each has their own unique ability, but it is worth noting that while they do mostly spawn in their respective biomes, often at high game stages, they will spawn in any POI or in any horde, so keep in mind that you do have to worry about these pretty much everywhere at a certain game stage. First is the burned zombie. Nothing all that special. He can set you on fire occasionally with his melee attacks. You can drink some water to put it out. That's really it. Then the Plague Spitter, which will likely have a very different appearance soon, so this section may be slightly out of date soon, but fuck it, we ball. These guys spawn in the desert mainly, but their big thing is spitting bugs at you. You can interrupt their spit attack by doing basically anything that would interrupt an animation. Killing them, for one, would work, but also knockdowns and stuff like that tend to work well. The bugs themselves inflict a slow effect when they hit you and have a high infection chance, but they aren't just a projectile, they're an actual being that you can kill. They're resistant to range damage, so early on it can be a bad idea to shoot them, but once you get a good gun, it tends not to matter anyway. They also occasionally spawn when breaking tree stumps, and if they do, you'll be guaranteed honey for your trouble. So that's fun. Then comes probably the worst of all the biome zombies in my opinion, the Frostclaw. These fuckers spawn primarily in the snow biome. They're very dangerous just as normal zombies, but they also have a ranged attack that can absolutely wipe you out if it actually hits you. It's often very easy to see it coming, but if you're distracted looting or something, then it can hit you and it is devastating. And on higher difficulties, it's often an insta-kill. This attack also does considerable block damage with a splash effect, meaning that they can be a real menace on high game stage horde nights throwing rocks at your fighting position. They should obviously be prioritized when seen on horde nights. If you can stagger it while it does its animation, it often stops it from doing the throw though. Also, if you can remove the arms or legs from either the Frostclaw or Plague Spitter, they can't really do their animations, so that would nullify it as well. The last biome zombie is the mutated zombie, and these appear mainly in the wasteland. They do a radiation attack that causes radiation damage when it hits you. Luckily, it's pretty short range, and the biggest issue is the annoyance they cause when the effect starts. Just stay a few meters away from them and you'll be fine. Arguably the biggest threat to your bases in 7 Days to Die are the demolition zombies. These start appearing in hordes on very high game stages or even in POIs, but usually in guaranteed locations, like the roof of the academy or the basement of the Ostrich Hotel. These are high health enemies with very high armor ratings, but the main threat is their chest bomb. If you shoot the green light, it'll explode and not just damage you, but it often annihilates structures, making them the worst problem for late game horde bases. The obvious solution, of course, is to just avoid shooting the button and shoot them in the head instead. But if you do shoot them in the button, try to kill them before it goes off, which somehow deactivates the bomb. I never really questioned how that works until just now. Anyway, you should be careful with explosives and certain traps because they can set off the button, especially the robotic turret. On the plus side, if you're someone who doesn't use a base or you find yourself out in the wild fighting one of these, you can basically one-shot it by just hitting the button and running for your life. Another consideration is the building blocks of your base. Yes, steel is obviously more health than concrete, so obviously you should try to have steel anyway, but even better is that steel has explosive resistance, making it even more important important for handling demo explosions. This last section is just going to cover the miscellaneous special zombies that don't have much to say about them beyond a very simple gimmick. Screamers. Screamers spawn when you generate too much activity in an area. This is often caused by firing your gun or by mining ores, or most commonly by keeping your forges and other crafting stations active for too long. If they detect you, they'll scream and summon a small horde, often with other screamers, leading into a whole clusterfuck of screams to deal with. This mechanic can be exploited to farm XP though. An easy way to deal with them is just surround your base with a bunch of wooden spikes. They'll usually end up dying on them before they can get a scream off. Any other trap you would like to use instead is also viable. You will also find wild screamers in POIs, but their scream isn't real as far as I've ever seen, it's just kinda there to spook you. Spider zombies. These little pricks can jump if they can see you. Yet another reason to put walls on your horde base because they can jump behind you if you're visible. Then there are wights. Wights aren't actually all that special, but they do often end up being the most dangerous zombies of their special class, due to having very fast run speeds, even higher health, and just generally being very determined to eat your ass whole. The cure to these particular types of zombies is of course shooting them in the head with a really big gun. Sometimes the biggest problems have the simplest solutions. So 7 Days to Die 2.5 has dropped on all platforms, and I have even more tips to share with you guys so you can have the best chance of survival. We're going to cover tips that'll help you transition from 2.4 to 2.5 as easily as possible. My first piece of advice is to not underestimate temperature and storms. I've covered this more in depth in other videos, so I'll spare you the lengthy explanation, but basically if you just go into the snow biome or the desert biome without adequate temperature protection, you will find yourself in a lot of trouble. The freezing and sweltering effects will slow your movement, reload speed, and jump height by 20%. If you're playing on faster run speeds, this is a pure death sentence, especially in heavy armor. You can alleviate it with run speed boosting gear and mega crushes, but just going in like you did in 2.4 can and will get you killed very quickly, especially if something like a mountain lion spots you. And even if you're not playing on faster run speeds, if you're playing with storms or smell enabled, the zombies will automatically get a run boost, and that means that during storms or while you're being smelled, you really want to make sure your temperature is up. And if you have to go into these biomes without good temperature protection, stay near your vehicle at all costs. On to number 2. Extra ways to avoid temperature. I've covered the main ways to mitigate temperature in a previous video, but I've found some more that might just be able to save you in a pinch. Fire arrows, Molotovs, and candles also give heat, along with the usual torches, burning shaft, campfire, forges, chemistry stations, and burning barrels. Speaking of barrels, Number 3. Avoid irradiated barrels. There's a new hazard in POIs in 7 Days to Die, and if you see these rusty yellow barrels, they'll irradiate you when you get close, which is a pretty disorienting visual effect and a decent health drain. Try to avoid these barrels wherever possible. Acid barrels and all the other types of barrels are still safe to be around, but you should also know that they changed it so that when you shoot a barrel once, it will explode. So be a little bit more careful when firing around those barrels. One wrong shot and you could go up in flames. Number 4 is armor repair. Now, I'm told this isn't actually a feature specific to 2.5. I don't know precisely when it was added, but on the off chance you also missed it during the 2.0 update cycle, armor durability now actually does affect your armor rating. If your armor is close to breaking, it'll barely protect you. So make sure you keep it in good condition because you will be taking way more damage than what it says on the item description. You can check your actual effective armor rating in this trophy icon screen in your inventory. Speaking of armor, number 5, you can now stack multiple attribute helmet mods on a helmet. So you can have strength, perception, agility, intellect, and fortitude mods all on the same helmet. And that's also because level 6 armor now has 5 mod slots to help you with the new temperature lining mods. So that can save you a huge amount of skill points and have a more versatile build. By the way, if you end up finding the rest of this video helpful, it would really mean a lot if you leave a like and hit that subscribe button. I make 7 Days to Die content like this every single week. Number 6, getting the best clothing. Now, clothing is not currently craftable in 7 Days to Die. You have to loot it, and clothing essentially spawns in all the locations you would be used to seeing armor spawn in if you've played the game previously, largely in end loots and clothing related containers like clothes shelves and nightstands, which means that savage countries are of course a great way to get clothing. The best clothes, level 6 Thermacore clothing, you want to be loot stage 164 or higher, which you can check here, to loot loot it from clothing containers because that's when it reaches the highest likelihood of spawning level 6 Thermacore clothing. I have a video on maximizing your loot stage that I will link on a card on screen if I remember. If I don't, comment that and I'll put it there. And there you can see how you can get to loot stage 164 as quick as possible. Number 7. Living off the land. With 2.0's biome progression system, it has become more and more essential to have living off the land if you want to become quickly capable of surviving in these biomes. Even just one rank can massively decrease the amount of time and thus the amount of biome items you have to craft to finish all the biome challenges. The Black Lung Serum requires mushrooms, and living off the land will help with that a lot, at least the first rank to get twice as many. The Sunstroke Tonic though also needs aloe leaves, which will help there, and Scorcher Stew needs blueberries, which will also help there. The Fallout Flush needs supercorn and rad mushrooms. The easiest way to get supercorn is to actually just buy the seeds from Trader Rect, who sells them quite often, grow them, and then harvest them with living off the land. Save these items for your biome progression consumables. Most of the items required for your biome consumables are actually pretty easy to collect as you just go through the biome, but some items can be real obstacles if you don't plan ahead. So always remember these 3 particular items if you're playing with biome progression turned on. Number 1 is acid. Now obviously acid is one of the most highly desired items anyway, so I'd hope you're not just throwing that away or selling it, but it is worth noting that you should keep a stock of these ready for when you want to go to the wasteland. Number 2 is chili. Now chili is a loot and trading item only. That means it's actually sometimes difficult to reliably get a lot of it because you're completely at the mercy of RNG here, whether the traders or the vending machine sell some or if loot just decides to give you some. And of course there's so many different canned foods that can spawn in its place, it can be annoying to get chili sometimes. So try and keep hold of it because it's used in Scorcher Stew, the snow biome consumables. So where possible, try to save chili over all the other canned food items, at least in the early game, so you can always make sure you have them for Scorcher Stew when you go to the snow biome. You only need to save something like 5 or 6 of all of these items, by the way. There's nothing worse than wanting to go to a biome and then realizing, oh, I need to find 6 chili if I'm going to be able to become immune to the biome effects, which is going to be a pain to find in the snow biome at the time. And in that same vein, number 3 is beer. Beer is also used in Scorcher Stew and can be mildly annoying to get early on before you're farming, so make sure to stock up on a few of them when you want to go to the snow biome. The easiest way to get beer and chili is probably going to be vending machines that you visit pretty much every day anyway if you're playing with those, but if not, definitely keep a small stash of these 3 items so that you can go to the other biomes. But there's even more to know about biome consumables actually. Number 9, biome consumables and gear are actually really easy money. Black Lung Serum requires plant fiber, water, nitrate, and mushrooms and can be sold for 220 dukes. It's very easy to make these if you have a mushroom farm or spend a couple of days in the burned forest collecting wild mushrooms as you go. But that's not all. The biome gear is made from relatively cheap stuff for the most part and can be sold for a few hundred dukes. It's not the worst way to make some extra money once you unlock that item. Number 10, build a pool or bring a bucket in your vehicle. If you're playing with smell enabled, it can be very dangerous to eat food outside because it attracts zombies. But if you build a pool at your base or base next to a river, you can submerge yourself to clean the smell off before you leave your base. And if you need it on the go, you can always carry a bucket of water and place it above you to try and make a makeshift shower to clean off the smell as well. And I have an 11th tip here related to apiaries after I finally got a chance to play with them on stream a few days ago. The apiary has some minor things that you should know about to use them safely and have them actually function. Number 1, try not to interact with them at all unless you absolutely have to before you have a smoker. The apiary can and will spawn bees, and it seems like it's about 50% of the time whenever you activate the apiary. And there's absolutely no cooldown or limit to that, by the way, which absolutely fucking sucks. So if you need to interact with it several times because you're fiddling around with it trying to make it work, bees are gonna spawn, which is just the worst. Number 2, if your apiary isn't working, 1, make sure of course you give it the 10 flowers it needs to generate 1 honey, but also it needs access to the sky. Why does it need access to the sky? Because it's basically just a reskin dew collector that makes honey instead of water. And number 3, the apiary does produce heat, meaning it can attract screamers. It uses the same heat generation value as the dew collector, which, to spare you the XML gobbledygook, is basically about 16% of the heat a campfire produces. So not a huge amount per dew collector or apiary, but enough that you probably shouldn't build, 100 of them. If you want even more 2.5 tips, why not check out this video popping up on screen right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. So, you want to level up quickly in 7 Days to Die? Well, we're going to cover how to get the biggest XP multiplier and then go in depth on the best methods for gaining a lot of XP quickly. The first thing you can of course do is just turn the XP multiplier up in the settings up to 300%, an obvious one of course, but if you do want the fastest leveling for any particular reason, that is something you should be aware of. Now for conventional gameplay, let's cover the items needed to get the biggest XP multipliers. First we have the Nerd Goggles. Nerd Goggles are a heavy armor headpiece that gives you 20% more XP at level 6, and it is an obvious and powerful XP multiplying headpiece. There is another one though. The Scavenger Hat at quality 6 will give you 60% more XP when specifically salvaging, so if you decide to salvage for XP, you'll want this hat over the Nerd Goggles. The next item is the Treasure Hunter Helmet mod. This mod gives you 10% more XP gain plus 5 loot stage, minus 1 to digging radii when doing buried missions, and getting this can be annoying, but generally the best bet is going to be checking the trader frequently, or you can occasionally get it from end loots, particularly at tier 3 and above. However, if you do the kill 50 tourists challenge, you will get a treasure hunter mod as an option for that as well. The next thing you should do is add in Grandpa's Learning Elixirs. These give you 20% more XP for 6 minutes, which can be extended to 12 minutes with Iron Gut. If you're playing without traders and you want this, you'll rarely find it in food loot, and you can craft it with level 80 food crafting. It takes 2 dog food, 2 red tea, 1 acid, 1 beer, and a supercorn, so it's actually pretty hard to craft a lot of it, and funnily enough, I think dog food might be the hardest part of this to get a lot of. MasterChef has no effect on the cost of crafting it, unfortunately. For everyone else, vending machines often sell a few of these at 750 dukes each, which is quite expensive, but it is easily the most reliable way to get the drink. With these 3 items combined, you'll be at plus 50% XP gain. There's also another XP consideration, the Sledgehammer skill book. Rank 5 will give you double XP with Sledgehammer headshot kills. This makes the Sledgehammer no doubt just 100% the best melee weapon as far as leveling quickly goes. With the XP items I just told you and a Sledgehammer headshot, you can get 1000 XP per kill on a basic zombie on base settings, which is very, very good. So if you're aiming to level up faster, just generally, the Sledgehammer will help you do that a lot more. So let's talk about the best methods of gaining XP. So I did a bunch of tests comparing the main methods of XP gain in 7 Days to Die. The 3 main ones that are of any relevance to this are salvaging, building, and mining. I've also thrown in my own experience with selling, killing, and questing. Because those are much harder to empirically test due to the incredible variance in their XP gain depending on a variety of factors, I've decided to just boil that down to my experience. The absolute highest XP gain I could get out of salvaging while in an extremely car dense area, I salvaged almost continuously for 10 minutes, and in 10 minutes I got from level 10 to level 15, and then I sold all the stuff I had gotten and got a further 4 levels. Now this was done with all of the discounts except better barter, because it would have messed with my actual level, making comparisons harder. So you could easily get an extra level with that, because the more money you sell an item for, the more XP you get for it. So XP multipliers and discount multipliers work together when it comes to XP for selling. A couple of things to note. Salvaging XP is still highly variable. You might not be able to find enough cars to continuously harvest. You might also want to craft your salvage scrap into things like mini bike handlebars to get more money in XP per harvested item. So you can take this a lot further than I did, but as a baseline, harvesting directly got me 5 levels, with almost 5 more levels coming from trading with the traders. Now the reason I started at level 10, by the way, is so that we can test all the methods equally while still having access to a few basic perks needed to do the tasks. We're going to compare the other options now with this in mind and see how they stack up, but it's worth noting that we've combined 2 methods here, salvaging and selling. Selling in general is an excellent way to get XP, but one of the best ways to get enough stuff to sell to keep that XP rolling is by salvaging, so I've linked them together here because they're both made much better by playing with one another. Either way, this is a very fast way to level up and you can't go wrong with it. Now unlike salvaging and basically all the other XP methods in the game, mining is extremely consistent because you can do it continuously as long as you want, often without interruption. Now we need to figure out some info as to how XP is affected by mining. You gain very little XP for mining stone or other things like clay. You also gain very little XP for mining iron, which is made worse by the fact that it takes more hits to destroy iron and generates more heat than some of the other materials. Lead does get you a lot more XP, but it has the same problem with taking more hits and generating more heat. Best options you have for XP are coal, nitrate, and oil shale because they get the same amount of XP as lead, but they generate less heat and they are much easier to one-shot, which makes collecting them much faster. So always try to mine one of those 3 ores above if XP is the only goal. Additionally, you gain less XP per block when using an auger. Pickaxes tend to actually be a lot faster overall at mining stone things in particular. And let's analyze a partial myth about mining in 7 Days to Die. Do you get less XP from using Motherlode? The answer is both yes and no. This stems from a part of the game files which does show undoubtedly that Motherlode has a direct effect on the reduction of the XP you get from mining. What the people who told you that didn't know is there to compensate for the additional resources you get from the perk, because generally you get more XP for more resources when mining. You can see very plainly that if you have no ranks in Motherlode, you get 298 XP from mining ores, and mining the same node with 5 ranks of Motherlode will actually get you 320 XP, which is a minor buff. And with the level 6 miner helmet, you can see this went up to 388 XP per block. However, and this is absolute batshit insanity, this game must be held together with duct tape, with no perks and no extra boosts, and all of the Art of Mining books, you get 328 XP per block. Then, if you add in the mining helmet at level 6, you get 414 XP. And if you add in Rockbusters, that goes up to 441, but then adding coffee in turned it down to 435. Removing the coffee and adding the mining gloves, it goes back up to 442, and then you add in 5 ranks of Miner 69er and it stays exactly the same. But then when you add 5 ranks of Motherlode, it goes back down to 350. What the fuck is happening? Why is it that Motherlode increases the amount of XP when you have no other boost, but it decreases it when you do? What I have to assume here is that there's some spaghetti code going along, or perhaps it's just a very particular quirk of how 7 Days to Die applies these modifiers together in certain orders, causing the big XP boost from Motherlode to be added at the end of your calculations, and it's much more severe the higher the amount of resources you get. That's just a theory, a game theory. But regardless of why this happens, the best XP I was able to obtain was the following. Steel Pick, fully modded, level 6. Coal, nitrate or shale, Rockbusters, mining helmet, mining gloves, miner 69er, and if we add in the treasure hunter mod, it goes to 464 XP, and then if we add in the learning elixir, we get up to 563, which is excellent. No Motherlode, no coffee, no auger, and we're using the mining helmet instead of the XP helmet because it actually has a better effect on your XP overall. With this setup, I was able to one-shot ores, and in 10 minutes of continuously mining, this took me from level 10 to level 21, and that's a huge boost of XP compared to salvaging alone, and it's still more than salvaging and trading combined. There is a big thing to note though. I was using a level 6 pick with 4 mods, one of which was the Bunker Buster, which increases your damage against stone, coal, nitrate, and oil. That allowed me to one-shot destroy the ore blocks. This is the biggest reason that mining is one of, if not the fastest, XP gaining methods in 7 Days to Die. If you can get 500 XP per swing, basically, it's going to dwarf killing enemies, building, scavenging, selling, anything really. If you can't get it to where you one-hit the ores, it will be significantly slower, but it's still a very safe, very reliable, and very fast way to level, regardless of how set up you are. But at its most extreme, it absolutely does dwarf the other XP methods. Speaking of which, with all our XP boosts, we get about 103 XP for upgrading a block to wood, and an additional 129 for cobble, and an additional 259 for concrete, and then an additional 389 for a steel block. What this means is we get 880 XP for upgrading 4 times. It is therefore more time efficient to continuously upgrade concrete blocks to steel for 10 minutes because 389 times 4 is obviously higher than 880, which is pretty obvious. However, that's extremely impractical because 1, you need enough steel to continuously upgrade several hundred blocks over the course of like 10 minutes. To test this, by my calculations, you would need about 800 concrete blocks placed, which would be 8,000 steel to do this for 10 minutes. It's not exactly a sustainable XP method. This is not a very smart test, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to give myself as many materials as possible and go through the process of placing a frame and upgrading it to steel continuously for 10 minutes, because that's an action you could actually replicate outside of a vacuum. I did that for 10 minutes, placed and upgraded 196 blocks with a nail gun, and went from level 10 to level 18. So slower than mining, but faster than exclusively salvaging, but less XP overall than salvaging and selling. It's worth noting that unlike salvaging and mining, this consumes resources, so it actually requires a lot of extra setup time, which wasn't accounted for here. overall, I'd say mining beats the other two most easily tested XP methods. The other competitors here are of course just trying to sell, killing, and questing. I can tell you from experience that selling is great, but it's not something you can sit and do continuously in the same way that you can do mining or salvaging, because it requires objects you gather from other methods. Killing is good. Killing is good for XP, but it is another consumptive exercise. Very often you might find you're using a lot of ammo to do that, but if you could use the sledgehammer and just endlessly fight zombies, for example with an XP farm made from screamers and loads of campfires, you could probably level pretty quickly with that as well. But overall, it's just a lot more work and risk, and probably won't be as reliable or safe as mining. And questing is honestly not even all that notable for XP, quite frankly. It kind of just gives you more XP for what you're probably going around doing anyway. I think the best course of action if you want to level as fast as possible is to mix the 4 main methods in this video and make that into sort of a play style. If you do want to know how to get the most money so that you can leverage the selling part of this video into even more money, resources, and XP, why not check out this video appearing on screen right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. So you want to make a lot of dukes in 7 days to die as efficiently as possible. You've come to the right place. We're going to cover the basics of trading, how to maximize your discounts and money made, and then cover a bunch of really good ways to make a lot of money. Let's jump in. So, of course, to start out, you'll need to find yourself a trader to trade with. All of the traders are equal as far as selling items to them. When you're selling stuff to the traders, keep in mind that they will only buy a couple of stacks of each item every trade cycle, and you can see the next trade cycle reset in the top right of the trading menu here. Is pretty much every 3 days. When that cycle's over, they'll have new items to sell you, and you can sell them repeat items again. Outside of that limitation though, traders have infinite money, so you can rob them with whatever items you have. Alright, basic mechanics out of the way, let's get into the real money making. So, to get absolutely the most money in 7 days to die for each item you sell and for the cheapest items possible, you'll need discounts. The 2 easiest discounts are found by checking vending machines, 2 of which spawn in every trader compound for 2 items, sugar butts and awesome sauce. Each of these will give you 10% better prices when buying or selling at the trader. The downside being that they do cost a little bit of money to get and are only temporary, so you don't want to waste these on small purchases or small sales. Save them for buying big items or selling a lot of things at once to the trader. If you really want to dedicate yourself to this trading playstyle, just buy these 2 items whenever you see them, otherwise they can be a little bit troublesome to get a large amount of. The next thing you'll want is either the Enforcer glasses or a Ranger hat. These 2 items have the same effect of giving you between 2 and 20% better prices at the trader depending on item quality. Ideally, get yourself a level 6 of either of these, it doesn't really matter, just pick one and bring it with you whenever you go to the trader. These will combine with the previous items to get you up to a 40% discount. Relatively easy so far. There is also the Athletics hat, which only applies to buying consumables, and Preacher hats, which only apply to buying and not selling. They're fine if they're all you have access to, but all things being equal, get the glasses or the Ranger hat. Next, we want a cigar. A cigar gives you 10% better prices at the trader and +1 strength. Make sure you have one of these equipped to your Ranger hat or Enforcer shades. You can rarely find these in desks and end loot, or you can find the Urban Combat Skill Book, which will let you craft them. But you will need testosterone extract, which can be rarely looted from medical loot or bought from Trader Jen, but if you have no luck there, killing a bear and using a knife on its body will work, and if you want to find bears, the snow biome has always got one lying around somewhere. To be clear, the cigar is an armor mod, not a consumable, so just make one and attach it to your headgear and you'll have the bonus as long as you have the headgear equipped. That gets us up to 50% better prices. Then we have Better Barter. This perk in the intellect tree is an expensive investment of 5 skill points, and it requires high intellect, but it will get you an additional 25% better price boost. This will get you up to 75% better prices. Additionally, you can get the Magnum Enforcer Volume 4 book, which will give you the ability to get a 5% discount when using any 44 weapon. It says the Magnum, but it does also include the Desert Vulture in the code, so either is fine. So that'll get you up to 80% better prices. The last item is the Pumpkin Cheesecake. This will give you an additional 5% discount, but only when buying items, not selling. It's a bit of a pain to make, it almost never actually spawns in loot, and it just isn't that powerful, but if you're dedicated to pinching those pennies, you should know this. You'll need 18 cooking skill, pumpkin, eggs, cornmeal, animal fat, and some beer to make it at a campfire. So with that, you'll get 85% off with any purchase and 80% more for any items you want to sell. One thing worth noting though, all your discounts don't actually apply at the vending machines because alas, you cannot riz the machine. Price is absolutely maximized. What can you actually do to make money? So you'll get money every time you complete a quest for the trader. Clears pay more than fetches and buried supplies, but fetch clears pay more than just clears. Nobody has ever done a restore power quest, so I have no idea what they give you. Could be a dry hand job and a pack of cigs for all I know. Anyway, questing is decent for money, especially if you're going to be running around clearing POIs anyway. You might as well get a few hundred to a few thousand more dukes for doing it. The biggest drawback with this method is you'll have to do high level quests to get much money, and it is much slower than the other methods we'll cover later in the video. Making daring adventurer in the intellect tree will help here because it increases the amount of dukes you get for quests. The real money will actually come from selling stuff. When you loot POIs, probably while you're questing, you'll usually get a few leveled items at the end, in particular at high levels. You might get a pretty high quality gun or a piece of armor which you can sell for a few thousand dukes each. Generally, you'll want to repair these items and sell them to get full price. Combine this with the tips I showed you earlier to maximize your money, and it'll often net more than the actual quest reward. As a side note, by the way, the old tip that we used to give out for this, where you would put mods on your armor and weapons to make them increase in price exponentially, no longer works, so there's no real reason to put your mods on there, rather than just selling the mods independently. What you want to sell will depend on your needs. You might not need the armor or weapon or tools it provides, in which case just sell those, but you might also not have any particular need for, say, shotgun slugs. And ammo does sell very well. It's a bit backwards though to sell ammo because the main purpose at the end of the game when you have all these dukes is going to be to smelt them down into a forge, turn them into brass, and then make bullet casings out of them. So it's almost always going to be a waste to buy or sell ammo, unless you know you don't need that specific kind of ammo, or maybe you just need quick money. This is all also limited by needing to be a high level to really get anything worth selling. A much better method is the next one. By the way, if you're enjoying this video or finding it helpful, it would be greatly appreciated if you hit that like button and hey, maybe subscribe for more 7 Days to Die guides like this. So, get yourself a wrench, a ratchet, or an impact driver and go around scrapping pretty much every car you see. Fill your inventory with all of this stuff and sell the stuff you don't need. Now, of course, you may need some amount of all of these things throughout your playthrough, so make sure you keep a nice little stash of each of these before doing this strategy. If you want to take this a step further, you can get the salvage operations perk from the perception tree. This will give you 100% more scrap and make you use less stamina when salvaging, making it all go much easier. Additionally, you can get the scavenging gear. Now, the headpiece will give you scavenging XP, which may or may not be of interest to you. The outfit will give you extra carry capacity. Again, mileage may vary. Two important pieces are the gloves, which give 30% better harvest, and the boots, which gives 40% less stamina use with salvaging tools. Additionally, look out for Hacker's Candy, which also spawns in vending machines. That'll give you 20% more salvage harvest. All that combined is 150% more salvage harvest, which is essentially 150% more money. If you want to take this even further, get yourself a workbench and get to level 20 in vehicle crafting. This will allow you to craft mini bike handlebars out of mechanical parts, springs, headlights, electrical parts, and short iron pipes, all of which you gather just by scrapping cars. These items have a combined selling price of about 121 dukes, but if you can craft them into mini bike handlebars, you can sell the same things for 360 dukes as a base before discounts and stuff. The reason we're using the mini bike handlebars is because they're the best option for making money from salvaging alone that doesn't include any kind of non-salvageable item. For example, if we go one level up to motorcycle handlebars, these do sell for 600 dukes, which is significantly better, but they also require a very costly 15 duct tape, which probably isn't going to be worth the time and resources that would take. You can sell 3 stacks of these to each trader every trade cycle, so it's very unlikely that you'll find yourself unable to sell more. If you want to take this even further, you can get the first 2 ranks of Grease Monkey, which will give you 33% cheaper crafting of mini bike parts. This will reduce your costs such that 89 dukes worth of scrap can be turned into 360 dukes rather than the 121 dukes previously. With all the tips combined, you can sell a stack of handlebars for 32,400 dukes, meaning you can get just under 100,000 dukes from each trader per cycle, which is pretty good. That's also just under 100,000 XP as well, which is not a bad late game leveling method. But what if that's all too much work? And besides, it is technically unsustainable. You will run into shortages of cars and these materials eventually, and you might need them for your base. Don't worry, we have another option. This option is much less potential per trader per cycle, at only about 27,000 per trader per cycle with max discounts, but it's also a lot less hassle in my opinion and requires far less perk investment than the salvaging crafting loop. This one is simply growing supercorn. Supercorn with all the boosts I just mentioned can sell for 9,000 dukes per stack, allowing 27,000 dukes per trader per cycle. The upside being that farming is infinite. You can always grow more crops and you can always place more farm plots. The only real limitation being here that you will of course have to cut down all the supercorn, and at a certain point of growth it will stop being worth the time it takes to plant and break down. Fortunately, supercorn is one of the few crops you can cut down with a chainsaw, meaning you can collect it far faster than most. Now I could go on a deep dive about how to get the most crops possible and how to unlock supercorn, but this video is already decently long and I literally just made a guide on how to maximize farming. So if you found this helpful and you want to use the supercorn selling method, I would recommend checking out this video on screen where I go over how to become an absolute master of farming. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video. What we're going to do today is show my favorite POI from each tier to get the easiest access to loot or to certain kinds of rarer loot more easily. There's a tie at one of the levels as well. Let's jump in. Just because the tier 0 remnants have no end loot rooms doesn't mean they have nothing of value in them, which brings us to our first POI, the Easy Chem Depot. This POI has an ammo pile on the roof, and inside it only has 2 zombies summoned by pressing this button. Inside there's basically just an ammo pile with not many other useful containers, but there is value in what you're seeing. There are 6 small acid barrels and 6 quad acid barrels. Make sure to get the ones outside as well. With Wasteland Treasures Volume 3, you can use a wrench to scavenge acid 25% of the time from these small barrels or 50% of the time from large acid barrels, so you can regularly get several bottles of acid from this unassuming POI. I've had as high as 6 out of this POI before. Additionally, there are 9 plastic barrels and several tires. This can net you a base of about 100 polymer. There is one thing you do have to worry about though. These acid barrels work like gasoline barrels, so if you break the blocks holding the acid barrels up, the entire room will blow up. So safely remove the acid barrels with a wrench or a tool before breaking the blocks underneath them. Best tier 1 in my opinion is a POI called the Cook's Residence. This easy POI has about 7 zombies in it, so it's quite easy to clear. It has 9 chemistry kits, each of which has a good chance of giving you acid, glue, and rare chemicals like testosterone extract or gunpowder. It also has a chemistry station, allowing you to get a chance at a Forge Ahead magazine. There's also a food pile and 2 Poppin' Pills crates. These are very good for getting medical loot and even beakers early on. And it has 2 medical piles, which are also excellent for medical magazines and medical loot. There's also a safe in the attic, which can have decent loot, and a weapons bag, which has a decent chance to drop ammo and guns. For a tier 1 that has like 5 rooms, this place is packed with loot, so never skip it. This POI is probably the most powerful one in the game realistically. It's the tier 2 Crack-a-Book POI. This one is absolutely filled with a variable amount of magazines. I got about 31 skill magazines out of here on one run through with no skill point specialized into anything. I also got a couple of skill books and schematics. The main concern in this POI is the zombie dog on the roof in the final loot room, so come with a plan to deal with him, but otherwise it's a very easy clear. Aside from the regular bookshelves and piles, there's also also a book crate in the main room, as well as a desk. You can find ammo in the kids zone near the corn, where they foreshadow the dog with the kennel. There's also potentially 2 functioning vending machines at the end of the hallway near the bathrooms. There's a workbench in the loading bay that might get you an extra Forge Ahead magazine. Make sure not to skip the office in this back area that has 2 cabinets, more books, and a safe. Watch out for the vulture on the roof, by the way. And in the final room, you'll find a crack-a-book crate, more books, a food pile, a shotgun crate, and a tier 2 loot container. If you find these in the trader quest list, always take them if you're trying to level your crafting skills quickly, and it's often worth going around all the larger towns in your game because they give you such an easy big jump in progression. By the way, if you're enjoying this video or finding it useful, a like would be greatly appreciated, and indeed a subscribe. I make several videos like this every single week. Back to the video. Tier 3 was a hard pick. I almost went for Bob's Boars and Carl's Corn because it's got so much meat, bones, and supercorn and rotten flesh available to you, but I think my real pick is more useful. The Tier 3 Poppin' Pills. This has a massive central room with medical shelves and utility loot, so you can get a lot of good things like meds and glue in here. There's also 4 cabinets in the photo section, which could get you a lot of books. The back room has 4 Poppin' Pills crates, and as I said, these are excellent for meds, medical skill magazines, and beakers. And in the underground tunnel section, you can find a food pile and even 2 acid barrels. The lab section has 2 more acid barrels and 3 chemistry sets with a chemistry station on the stairs up to the pharmacy. And then the pharmacy room itself has even more medical shelves for you to loot. You'll find 3 more Poppin' Pills crates on the roof for a total of 7, with a medical pile, an ammo pile, and a purse. And a tier 3 loot container, of course. Here's what I got from a level 50 looting of this location. Pretty decent stuff. I have 2 for tier 4, the Shotgun Messiah range and the Close Encounters gun range. The Shotgun Messiah range has several equipment racks to loot in the first room, as well as a gun safe and a crate with an ammo pile in the central room. Check the side room for the desk and the filing cabinet, and you can use blocks to climb into the ceiling above the classroom to find a hidden weapons bag. The waiting room sometimes has a working vending machine. The firing range often has filled medical cabinets at each end, and it has an ammo pile and a weapons bag. This can be a difficult fight, so be ready for that. There's not much loot on the roof, and I'd recommend instead of going the suggested route through the ceiling, jump off the roof or go back around the front and break down the front door to the gunsmith. Fight the zombies in a more open area, and in this room you'll find more equipment racks. In the back you'll find a gun safe and a weapons bag, and you'll even find another broken workbench in the workroom. There's 4 gun crates in the storage room with a large ammo pile, and of course your hardened tier 4 loot chest. Additionally, there is a 6th gun crate hiding in the back of the truck in the parking lot. Obviously, when you get your loot stage right, this is one of the best POIs in the game for guns and ammo, as is its sister POI, the Close Encounters gun range. In here you'll find a crate above the second door, a gun safe in the side office, and often a filled medical cabinet in the bathroom. You'll find 2 military shelves in the main store, and it often has several variable equipment racks as well as a filing cabinet. You'll find 2 ammo piles in the shooting range, and then in the final area, the kill house, you've got several gun crates, tier 4 hardened chest, and a large ammo pile. This can be a tough fight if you're not prepared, but use that main gate to your advantage. You also have a chance of a few of the military chests in the back rooms spawning extra loot. I think the Close Encounters gun range here is the worse and harder of the 2, but it is still very good, and I would never skip it if you want some guns. I'm gonna be honest, most tier 5s are a scam. Rarely are they worth the effort to fight through them. Generally, you just want to skip to the end as much as possible so you can get the one valuable part of them, unless of course you're on a clear quest. The Shotgun Messiah factory has a lot of gun crates and bags, but relative to the amount of time it takes to clear, I'd say it's just not worth it. The tier 5 Poppin' Pills might have the best actual amount of loot containers with like 9 Poppin' Pills crates, several weapon racks, and chemistry kits, but again, it's a lot of work for what you get. Instead, I've elected to select the fastest tier 5 to clear in my experience, meaning that you can run it over and over again with quests to get the most of the main thing you want from these, which is going to be that tier 5 loot container, or even tier 6 loot container as a tier 6 infestation. Hybrid mining is, in my opinion, the easiest and fastest tier 5 in 7 Days to Die 2.0. The main loot room is located at the center in the quarry, meaning you just fight off the waves, take it, and leave. There's a few valuable loot containers in this POI, including a nuke with a shotgun crate and occasionally a medical loot, and there's chemistry kits throughout. But the real strength of this POI comes from giving you the main thing you came for, that high level end loot, very quickly, and you can get this whole POI done in like 10-15 minutes if you want, compared to something like the Shotgun Messiah or Dashong Tower, which can take all day. I'd say it's a good trade-off. Now,